And good evening, everyone. I'm Trace Gallagher. Welcome to our special coverage of the 2020-2022 midterm elections. We are live in Washington, D.C. And it appears the Republicans are still on path to gain control of the House, but the numbers are still very much in question. And control of the Senate remains pretty much a toss-up with a handful of crucial races yet to be called. It is midnight on the West Coast, 3 a.m. here in the nation's capital. And while there was a bit of a red shift, the red wave never quite materialized. We do have Team Fox coverage. Anita Vogel is sampling GOP reaction to tonight's results, but we begin with Kevin Corke monitoring election night news for the Democrats. Kevin, good morning.
Evening, Trace, or good morning, as the case may be. And we're continuing to watch some of those very close tallies out west in particular, and I promise to bring you any information as we get it. But here in the east, we have a few, I guess I could call them surprises, some major surprises, in fact, to report on. And we begin in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where despite a relatively shocking performance in the lone debate of the race, John Fetterman, with a huge lead of mail-in ballots early voting, hangs on, and he is going to win the Senate seat and flip it blue, besting Dr. Oz, as you see, 50 to 47.5. Elsewhere, we know this. Fetterman said after the race, or after the balloting for the most part had been counted tonight, he was ready to get to work for the people of Pennsylvania, but even he seemed surprised by the outcome.
Every county, every vote. And that's exactly what happened. We jammed them up. We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do.
Well, they did what they needed to do, and I think the autopsy is going to be very interesting when people look back at how they were able to do it in exactly the granular detail, county by county, that will tell the tale of how Democrats pulled that off in the Commonwealth. Elsewhere, you see Maggie Hassan topping the general there, 54-44. So that is a bit of a nice bit of a surprise for Democrats. That stays in the incumbent category. How about in the state of Washington? Another Democrat who had faced a fairly strong challenge. Murray topping Smiley. Smiley, a very strong candidate, could not quite get the job done. The incumbent winning there as well, 57-43. In the great state of Ohio, it is J.D. Vance over Tim Ryan. This is a very closely watched contest. Vance does come away with the victory. Ohio tipping even more red than it had been before. How about in the Old Dominion, Virginia? Let's check this out. Spanberger right now leading Vega. We have called this race. The difference more than 10,000 votes, but Vega has not yet conceded in what many have called a bellwether race to keep an eye on. And I can tell you about another race in Virginia. This one actually flips into the red column as Kiggins tops Luria 52-48. That is a pickup for the GOP. And in unpacking the results, especially those tightly contested House races, much will be made, as I pointed out, Trace, on the early voting, the mail-in balloting. And that's part of the machinery that I think people will want to examine as they look back to how this night has actually played out. Meanwhile, over at the White House, the president may be in bed by now. I imagine he is, but he probably went to bed feeling pretty fine because he had a number of victors on the Democrat side with whom he could have a bit of a conversation. In fact, he made some phone calls today. Among them, he called Michael Bennet over in Colorado. Not a surprise there. J.D. Pritzker, who won in Illinois. Not a surprise there, but frankly, the margin for J.B. Pritzker was pretty surprising, I thought. Trace, we kind of figured he would win, but boy, he won by a big margin. So again, we'll keep an eye on the races that are still underway. Not as much change as we thought here in Washington after today's balloting.
Not as much of anything as we thought.
Yeah.
Kevin Corke, back to you as the news warrants. Thank you. Let's hear what Republicans are saying about Tuesday's results. Anita Vogel is live with us in studio. Anita, good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Trace. So Republicans did grab some key wins, both in the House and the Senate, with Republicans projected to take control of the House in the next Congress. Kevin McCarthy, who stands to replace Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, had a lot to say tonight. In fact, he said he hopes that America wakes up tomorrow in a country where Nancy Pelosi is not the speaker. Also tonight, we can tell you that some other notable mentions. In Ohio, I want to mention that Trump-endorsed candidate J.D. Vance, he claimed the Senate seat for Republicans. He is a venture capitalist who came to prominence after his book, Hillbilly Elegy. And he leveraged that notoriety for this successful run, beating out Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan. All right, I want to tell you about a couple of other things. Also down in Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp went on to win his second term as governor. It was a repeat of his matchup against Democrat Stacey Abrams from 4 years ago. Stacey Abrams did concede the race earlier this evening. And in the state of Virginia, there were 3 congressional seats up. Now, this state was supposed to be a real signal as to whether Republicans would have a red wave or not. Democrats won 1, and so far Republicans won 1 also. District 2, part of Virginia Beach and Norfolk, Jennifer Kiggins managed to flip that seat red. She is a state senator and nurse practitioner and former United States Navy helicopter pilot. She emphasized economic issues throughout the campaign and continued to tie the incumbent Congresswoman Elena Luria to President Biden and inflation. Also want to mention that Sarah Huckabee Sanders has won the governorship of Arkansas. She's the former Trump White House spokesperson and daughter of former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. And in New York, this was a big one for Republicans. District 17, Republican Greg Lawler has unseated Democrat Sean Patrick Maloney, the chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Trace, that was a big one for Republicans. They were watching that in the last few weeks, and we're going to be hearing more about that race in the next coming days.
Yeah, we're going to hear more about it in the next few minutes here. Anita, back to you as the news warrants. Thank you. I want to take a look at some of the key Senate races undecided at this hour. Let's begin in Georgia. This could be the change. I mean, this could be the critical race that changes control of the Senate. You can see Raphael Warnock with 49.3% and Herschel Walker with 48.6%. We've got 98% of the vote is in. You have to know that this thing, if these numbers stay the same or if Raphael Warnock does not get to 50% or over, that this will go in for a runoff election in December. Moving on now to Arizona, where Senator Mark Kelly leads Blake Masters. You can see in the top left-hand side of your screen, 53% of the vote in. It means a large part of Maricopa County, which is the largest county in Arizona. It is also where Blake Masters would find a great number of his votes. So this is not over by a long shot, but you can see in the early running that Mark Kelly has a substantial lead. We're being told by Arizona officials we may not get a call in this one until the morning. In Nevada, Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto leads Republican Adam Laxalt. And this one's kind of the same situation. You've got 54% of the vote in. You've got 60% of the vote in Clark County. That is Nevada's largest county. Also in, 40% left. And that 40% left in Clark County is more than the rest of the counties put together. So there's a lot of votes to be counted. Washoe County up in the north, which is Reno, and then some of the outlying counties are expected to go toward Laxalt. This thing will get much closer. And finally, in Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, Mandela Barnes. This one, a nail-biter. Right now, you have Ron Johnson leading this race. We hope to have a call in this one sometime in the hour, and that would change the dynamic. Meantime, let's bring in Democratic strategist Kevin Walling and America's First Policy Institute Chief Communications Officer Mark Lauder. Again, gentlemen, thank you both. Mark, to you first, because I want to pick up on something Jason Chaffetz said to me talking about the leader, Kevin McCarthy, and how some people in his party might want to challenge him for the speakership.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily see that happening. I mean, let's remember, one of the big things for the leader is not only directing floor traffic, but also raising money. And Kevin McCarthy raised like $500 million. One of the most prolific fundraisers. His team is amazing. Each one of those members probably benefited in some way from that war chest. He's also very big on the campaign trail. So while you might get some public posturing, I think it's probably more for committee assignments, leadership positions. I know Jason obviously knows the House much better than I do, but he's so strong, and I don't see a someone else of equal stature that could step up and give him a real big challenge.
Yeah, I want to go back to Pennsylvania as well, Kevin, because, you talk to Selena Zito, and she's like, hey, listen, Pennsylvania, you got to remember that just 2 months ago, right, 60 days ago, you had Mehmet Oz, who was down 18 points to Fetterman. And they had 40 days of early voting there, mail-in voting and early voting. And so if you were expecting this to change on one debate, good luck.
Well, he certainly closed the gap, and I think not just interestingly enough with the Senate race, the down-ballot congressional races where you didn't see Republicans pick up a single seat in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania really harmed their chances for blowing it out of the water with this red wave. So it just didn't have implications for Pennsylvania in terms of that Senate race, but also those down-ballot races as well. But to Mark's point, I think, not just Kevin McCarthy's ability to fundraise, but we've got to remember, he was in charge of recruiting in 2010. So a lot of those senior members now owe their loyalty to Kevin McCarthy. I think he'll be fine because, again, who will be the alternative? You can say, oh, he might not have the votes, but you got to have someone that steps up to run against him, and we'll see if someone materializes.
What's chore one on day one if the GOP controls the House? What would you recommend that they do? Do they just stop everything the Biden administration wants to do, or do they try to put forth some things that they want to achieve?
Well, we've been working with them, and so there's the America First agenda. That will not stop. Top 3 issues that I think the House, and you'll see them probably be House Bills 1, 2, and 3, are energy, immigration, and crime.
Yeah.
Border security, very important. You'll probably also see a very quick repeal of the 87,000 new IRS agents as pretty quick order as well.
Interesting to me as you look down these lists of all these top issues, and border security was way down, Kevin.
It certainly was, I think, in some of these national races, but certainly in Texas that overperformed. I think in Florida, a lot of people in Florida lined up behind the governor based on his actions recently around the immigration debate. But kitchen table issues trumped a lot of these core issues. And you saw abortion. We might not have been talking about it since the Dobbs decision recently, but that had a huge factor in a lot of these down ballot races as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Gentlemen, stand by. Let's bring in Steve Hilton from The Next Revolution. Steve, welcome back to you. I want to bring you in this as well because, you're out in California right now, and there's one thing that is certain, that California, as you look at some of these local elections and you look at what's happening across the state and overall across the country, I'm not sure if crime was an issue because it was way down on the list, but in California, it is certainly an issue, and in New York, it was certainly an issue, Steve.
Exactly, and as I pointed out earlier, that amazing result, he didn't win but came so close, Lee Zeldin. And in California, we could be seeing one of the biggest stories of this election, which is potentially the defeat of Katie Porter, one of the biggest stars in the Democratic caucus within the House of Representatives. That race is on a knife edge. The latest number here, 50.28% for her. Her Republican challenger, Scott Ball, 49.72. It's about 0.5%. And usually, the vote as it progresses through the night is better for the Republicans. So that could be an amazing result. You're also seeing some really encouraging results in the state legislature for Republicans. So I think people are just sick of this mismanagement of these blue states. You see it in New York, you see it in California, and by contrast, you see people voting in droves for effective, competent management delivered by Republicans, most notably in Florida, also in Texas. And that also brings me to another story that I think we should mention. Some of the biggest most high-profile candidates on the Democratic side losing quite comprehensively. Of course, in Texas, Beto O'Rourke losing again. In Georgia, Stacey Abrams losing again. These are real stars built up by the Democrats and their media supporters, not cutting it at all with the actual voters.
Yeah, and we should point out that Stacey Abrams actually conceded this time, so she can't really
That's
say
a miracle.
She can't really say that she's the governor anymore. You look at these issues, Steve, and I wonder if you think the whole concept. The Wall Street Journal had a big headline of the white suburban women moving toward the GOP. Did you see that?
Well, we haven't seen all the demographic breakdown. Remember that we've still got results to come because of this complete mismanagement of so many of the election systems by the Democrats. They've endlessly mucked around with our elections, which means that it'll be days, sometimes weeks, before we get full results, and therefore the full demographic breakdown. And so I think it's clear that there's a big realignment going on, and the Republicans are becoming in a phrase that I've been using for many years now, a multiracial working class coalition. That's going to be incredibly important in the long term.
Yeah.
And I think that the gender gap is something we'll definitely want to pay attention to. It's not clear to me where that stands right now.
Yeah.
And I think that to draw these sort of broad brush conclusions that this has been, as I was saying earlier, this is some kind of disaster for the Republicans, a triumph for the Democrats. Well, it's certainly not as good of a night as anyone was expecting for the Republicans, but there are certain things that can be Republicans could have grounds for optimism for. But overall, what's the story here about what's going on in politics across the country? And I think that it will mean, as I said earlier, that the Democrats will continue this journey towards the far left right across the country. And I don't think that's going to be helpful to them in the long term at all.
Yeah, and I want to bring in Kevin Walling in this. Kevin, do you think that's a fair assessment? Do you think the Democrats will continue on this path? Do you think they feel like this referendum is good news for them?
Well, certainly we have to see how this shakes out in its entirety. If Democrats control the Senate, then there's going to be a lot more negotiations back and forth. Kevin McCarthy, to some degree, is an institutionalist. I don't think he's interested in huge fights over the debt ceiling if he has a slim majority. So it's all going to matter what the numbers are at the end of the day and who those leaders are. But I think you're going to see, you know, an administration, a Joe Biden administration, that got a lot of things done in the first 2 years of that administration, probably pivoting to overseas engagement, the world. That's, you know, what President Trump did in his last 2 years, regulatory reform, which is things the executive agencies and departments can do, and less in terms of interaction with Congress. Everything
the president has touched, Mark, has turned to bad things. I mean, you look at the economy and Afghanistan and the border and I could go down a list, and he keeps pointing fingers. Well, it wasn't us, it wasn't us. And apparently the finger pointing is effective.
Well, I think to Steve's point earlier about mismanagement, and I think people are tiring of it. And so I think once we start giving them an opportunity to see what can be done, and if we have the majority in the Senate, we can actually bring it to the floor, try to work through and send things to the president's desk. If we don't, we'll definitely put things through the House of Representatives, and they can go to die in the Senate with Chuck Schumer. But you will see plans to lower energy prices, to seal and secure the border, to deal with crime, to deal with the things that matter to the American people. What the Democrats do with it is going to be another thing. And how they balance the needs of the squad, the progressives, that really control the energy of their party.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very difficult balancing act.
Is Steve Hilton still around? Is he still in his seat? Steve, I just want to go back to you very quickly again, because, you know, Mark brings up a good point. You talk about the makeup, you talk about what's happening, and you look forward, because before tonight, everybody was saying, you know, if it's bad, the Democrats are going to look at Joe Biden and say, you know what, Mr. President, you can't run in 24. We'll need somebody else. Is that still on the table, or does this give President Biden new life?
Absolutely. I'm not sure life is exactly the word you'd use to describe anything connected with Joe Biden at any time. But look, I think it absolutely will confirm his belief, especially in the context of any announcement by Donald Trump that he's going to be running again in 2024. Biden has this almost mystical belief, it seems, according to the reports, that he's the only person that can possibly beat Trump. And so even without this kind of result, I think Biden would be very strongly arguing that he should be given another crack at it. Now, I think it's going to be very hard for anyone to persuade him that he should step aside. And so I think we are going to see Biden there. And I think it's not just a disaster for the country, because he's obviously such a totally incompetent and embarrassing leader, if you can even use that word to describe him. I think it's a political disaster for the Democrats, because the longer they persevere with this kind of feeble machine politician, the worse it is for them.
And I got to go, but does Trump run? Yes or no? I got 15 seconds, Steve.
I think he's made that pretty clear. And so I think what you could be looking at here is a rematch, which a lot of people have been predicting.
Yeah.
Looks like it's much more on the cards tonight than it was, let's say, yesterday.
Kevin Walling, does he run?
I think Trump wins, and I think Joe Biden had a great night tonight, all things considered. Probably the best midterm year of any president since George H.W. Bush.
Mark Lauder, does he run?
Trump runs, and Joe Biden has a record this time he did not have last time.
Gentlemen, thank you all. Stick around for continuing live coverage of Democracy 2022. The control of the House and Senate still in the balance. An updated look at the numbers next. 321 on the East Coast. Welcome back to our special election coverage. Let's get an update on the balance of power in the House. Let's put this up on the screen. We're looking at the magic number. Of course, we know what the Republicans believe they might get when all is said and done, and we don't have time to go through all the races. But you see all those white spots? Republicans believe they might be at 222 seats when all is said and done. Some think maybe 223 or 224. 222, by the way, is exactly what Democrats have right now. So they believe Republicans will control the House. Moving now on to the Senate, and it's a little bit slimmer. You see the 4 white boxes in the middle? One of those is Ron Johnson in his battle with Wisconsin. Right now, Ron Johnson is leading that race. If you move out to the west, you've got Adam Laxalt now running, and he is behind, but about 40% of Clark County and many of the other counties in Nevada have not yet been counted, so that could bode well for him. But right now he's running behind. And in Arizona, where Mark Kelly and Blake Masters are going at it, Mark Kelly has a significant lead. But in Maricopa County, which is the biggest county in Arizona, same thing. About 60% of the vote has been counted there. Maricopa County is the most conservative. It is the biggest. It is everything encompassing one in Arizona. So that could bode well down the line, or maybe tomorrow, if Blake Masters can get back in this thing. Let's bring back in Anita Vogel and Kevin Corke. We're back out in the West. We might as well stay out there now because we talk a lot about what's happening in California. Steve Hilton was saying he doesn't know if crime is a big factor out there, but boy, you talk about the LA mayor's race, and it looks like crime was one of the primary factors.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, Trace, because you live there, and Kevin, you used to live there, and I used to live there. So yeah, I mean, it is front and center. It is on the ballot there. Now, this race is very interesting. It's between billionaire developer Rick Caruso. He owns some very popular shopping centers in LA, the Grove and a couple others, also some hotels. And his opponent is Karen Bass. She's the Democratic Congresswoman. She was a longtime member of the Assembly, the first black female speaker of the California Assembly. So this is a real race. It is going down to the wire tonight. It's neck and neck. Rick Caruso really made crime front and center. But Karen Bass has the Democratic machine behind her. And what's interesting is, if you remember in the news, her house was broken into and guns were stolen. So it is going to, I'm really interested to see where this race goes and what the voters have to say.
And I know you know California very well, Kevin, and it's interesting because you look around the state of California and we talk about, oh, there's this battle going on in the city of Los Angeles, but across the state, there is no battle. Gavin Newsom didn't even have to run a campaign. Right? He had an opponent, but he didn't even have to run a campaign. He won hands down. So when you talk about, and L.A., for all intents and purposes, Los Angeles, San Francisco, mess. They are a mess. Crime and homelessness and trash and the cost of living is exorbitant, and the taxes and the regulations, all that good stuff. Do you think this issue of crime is something that we are focused on nationally or just in certain areas?
I think it's everywhere, and I think it resonates, especially now when you think about the cost of living. You talked about the exorbitant cost. I mean, I love the Southland. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. But when you realize how much it costs to live there and the ancillary cost of just having to deal with everything you now have to deal with. It's not the traffic. We get traffic. It's the idea of not feeling safe. And that's an issue that I think crosses all party lines, too, which is why I'm frankly surprised that there wasn't more of a movement. And I thought Karen Bass would sort of win this thing going away. I really did. And maybe that's not going to happen now.
No, Rick Caruso has closed the gap in the weeks preceding the election, and so it's a real race
and the crazy thing about it is Rick Caruso was a Republican, now running as a Democrat, and he's got these Hollywood types, right? Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Pratt, and they're all coming out, Katy Perry, all coming out saying, you got to vote for Rick Caruso. And you think, well, what is happening to Hollywood? Because they see the problems. They live there, they see the problems, and they know what, something's got to be done, and they're not sure Karen Bass can go ahead.
Yeah, but Karen Bass has the other half of Hollywood. She's got just as many celebrities behind. She's got Jennifer Aniston and all the other big names.
So what am I saying exactly, right? Anita, Kevin, back to you. Joining us now, Fox News contributors Leslie Marshall and Jason Chaffetz. Jason, I want to pick up because this is fascinating. I was talking to Steve Hilton because you gave me an idea in this whole concept of, or I take that back. I was talking to Kevin Walling about, and Mark Lauder, about the whole, Kevin McCarthy maybe being challenged. And Mark seems to think maybe not, because he raises so much money that these people coming in, owe him. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of truth to that. It's a two-step dance. First, on Tuesday, they come in and they supposedly vote. But then you have all the way until the first part of January where you have to get to the floor and actually get to 218. And if your margin is real small and you get 10 Republicans saying, I'm sorry, Kevin McCarthy, but I'm not going to vote for you on the floor of the House, then you start to have the problems. When the margin is small, the leadership has problems. And I'm just telling you, this is scrambled eggs. As best as it is not for certain, and they will still be discussing it.
Leslie Marshall, if you were advising your party, and we've been talking about this, would you advise them to stay on the path they are on, which includes a lot of being disingenuous on behalf of the leader of the party, the man who's in the White House right now? Or would you say maybe there's a pivot to be had somewhere?
Oh, I think unless you have a wave of blue on my side, or just like on the other side and Jason's side, a wave of red, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. You have to look at your party. There are a couple of things I've always said about my party. One, we've got to get our ground game. We've got to get more people to come out. Democrats don't come out in the numbers Republicans do in midterm elections, although we've seen the youth come out. We need others to come out as well. Two, we need to unite. We have too many fragmentations in our party. So do the Republicans. And three, you need to listen to the voters, because that's going to change issues. In Michigan, for example, it's abortion. But in a place like Texas, you know, it's going to be immigration, and, you know, you need to listen. So for some people, you know, you're standing there and you're talking abortion, and that's not a kitchen table issue for some of those constituencies. And I said that before, and I'll continue to say that now going forward.
And it's interesting, Jason, because you look at what happened tonight, and you look at Florida, and you look at Pennsylvania, and these were disparate conclusions, like disparate countries were voting.
Yeah, you know, I saw Steve Moore talking to you earlier. I think there's a lot of truth to the people in the Northwest or the Northeast that have moved to Florida. And a lot of them are successful. They're conservative. They got conservative values. And I think that portended well in certain parts. But look, if you're a Republican, you've got to go back and look at Ron DeSantis, Marco Rubio, Senator Tim Scott, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Governor Abbott. These people dominated. Look at Mike Lee out in Utah. Okay, he took that Allen wrench. It just put the screws to the so-called Democrat, the guy who's going to run as Mr. Independent. The polls saying, oh, it's neck and neck. It was never neck and neck. Mike Lee won that race by 15 percentage points. We haven't even talked about him on Fox News tonight because it wasn't ever a race. And the polling is just abysmal, Trace. Why millions of dollars are spent on polling? What did it really tell us? Where did they really get it right?
It's a great point, because the polling really has been so off for the past 3 or 4 cycles. Lastly, Leslie, I just want to know, you know, you kind of look at your party and you look at some of the things that are going right and wrong, and I'm wondering if you believe that going forward the Democrats are looking at things like the border and maybe reworking that, or do you think they just stand pat on that specific issue, which didn't seem to resonate all that much with Democrats?
I think they look at their base and their voters. I mean, it's going to vary state to state and within those districts inside those states. So again, if you're in Arizona or Texas, immigration is going to matter a lot more than if you're in Michigan, as we're seeing the numbers. And I know abortion was on the ballot there, one of 5 states in Michigan. But we saw that abortion overtook inflation in the economy among voters in the state of Michigan as their top priority.
Leslie, Jason, stand by. Let's bring in FreedomWorks economist Steve Moore. Steve, you got a great shout out from Jason Chaffetz there, saying that you were, you had some good points there. I'm wondering, as you look at the overall night, and you admitted the last time you were on, you said, listen, I mean, I got it wrong. I got this whole thing wrong. But as you look at the map and you look at the night, Steve, what's your big takeaway?
So the reason I had it wrong is because I thought it was going to be the economy's stupid, but I'm not so sure it was, Trace. But, you know, the real interesting thing from an economic standpoint is how will the economy, how will the stock market respond to what happened tonight? I was just in our little break there. I looked at the futures market. The markets haven't really reacted much one way or the other right now. So I think that investors are trying to digest what happened. But here's the most important thing. even in the worst case scenario for Republicans, they will have a 4 or 5 seat majority in the House, even if they don't win the Senate. Now, why is that important from an economic standpoint? I would make the case that the biggest problem we have in this country right now is runaway massive government spending and debt under Biden. And the Republicans, if they have that House majority, which they will, then they can stop the spending. You know, Joe Biden can't spend money if the House of Representatives doesn't approve it.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, the markets are going to kind of react positively to that development.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you say that because, you know, you've said it 1,000 times and so have others. The markets hate uncertainty, right? And so you would think that this would at least give them a little bit of certainty that whatever the president wants to do next, whatever bill that he wants to pass that might cost $1.9 billion, it's not going to happen. That might boost or buoy the markets.
Exactly right. And so if you look at those massive spending bills that passed, for the most part, not all of them, but most of them passed with only Democratic votes in the House and Senate. Now Biden's going to have to go to those Republicans, and whether it's Speaker McCarthy or someone else in the Republican Party who has that Speaker's gavel, he's going to have to negotiate. Now, I'll just put a little asterisk by what you just said. You know, the other thing that the markets love and the economy love is divided power in Washington.
Right.
And you know what? We're going to have that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, that's what I was saying is, hey, the markets want nothing more than nothing to happen. Don't do anything.
There you go.
And then I'll give you 15 seconds, but that really is the mantra. Don't do anything until we get back, right?
Well, yeah, but if they could cut some spending, I think that would be a good thing, too.
Yeah. Steve Moore, back to you in a moment. Thank you. Stay right there. Let's bring back in Leslie Marshall, Jason Chaffetz, Anita Vogel, and Kevin Corke. Kind of a round-robin thing. And I'm fascinated by the whole concept. We don't have them? Do we have them? They're somewhere, right? Oh, we've got it. Oh, yeah, good. Okay, good. We're fascinated by this. But Anita, to you first, because, you know, you have covered this stuff for a long time. And as Steve was saying, you know, the takeaway that he's got in this thing is, you know, sometimes you don't watch the polls because the polling has been horrific for at least the past 3, maybe the past 4 election cycles. And yet, maybe it's landlines. Maybe they just cell phones don't. Maybe there's some dynamic in there, but it's been terrible, and there's some way they have to rectify this.
Yeah, they have to come up with a new system of polling because this one just is not working. But you know, going to Pennsylvania for a moment, I mean, that race is really confusing.
Your home, by the way.
Well, my home for now, yeah. It's really confusing in so many ways. But if you look at the state, it is 45% registered Democrats, 39% registered Republicans, 15% other. So it is basically it's a Democratic state.
Yeah.
So the Democratic votes were there. It was always going to be an uphill climb for Dr. Oz. And then throughout the night, I just want to say I'm watching this race in California. Katie Porter.
Right.
This is District
Steve was talking about
California 47. Yeah, Katie Porter. She could be unseated by Republican Scott Baugh.
Yeah.
I used to work in Sacramento many moons ago. He was in the state legislature a long time ago. So he's a seasoned politician. He's been around. He could unseat her.
And you know, when we talked about this earlier, Kevin, is that, you know, it seems they turned the lights out on the East Coast. Everybody's like, okay, let's go to bed.
Yep.
Well, we got some stuff going on the West Coast.
I'm
and
curious.
Katie Porter could lose, and that's a hit.
Yeah.
That would be a massive loss. I mean, Gold River, what's up? I mean, I love Sac. Sacktown's great. I would also add this. I've been watching Nevada very carefully.
Right.
And I think a lot of people sort of fell asleep on this, and I think Laxalt's sort of been creeping up. That is the one to watch. That happens, and I think a lot of people who went to bed thinking that, well, I guess it wasn't our night, might be rethinking that.
If we could put that up on the screen, we'd bring Jason Chaffetz back in. Jason, I mean, it's kind of interesting here because, you know, I've been talking about this. Bill Hemmer did a great job at this all night, trying to explain the demographics and trying to explain the topography and what is where and what counties are where. And just so we know, if we put up the Senate race in Nevada, you have it right there, Adam Laxalt at 47%. Well, it just went away. We had it for a brief second. If we can find it again and find out how much of it is, it's interesting because you have up in Reno area, right? Very conservative. It's out kind of in the wilderness in the Sierra Nevada mountains, south of Lake Tahoe. Washoe County always goes toward Republicans. And then you go toward Clark County, which is Las Vegas and the surrounding areas. It's the biggest county in Vegas. And there you have the race right there, 47.1. It went away again to 50, and this thing is getting much closer. Jason, your thoughts?
I think Laxalt actually pulls that off. You got these 15 rural counties, places like Elko and Ely that'll come in strong for Laxalt. I think one of the other undercurrents here that will get a lot of attention once you actually dive into the numbers is how well Republicans did with Hispanics. You look at what happened in Miami-Dade, you look at what happened in Florida, but then you start to look at other places like Texas. You know, one of my former House colleagues in Idaho, a guy named Raul Labrador, was elected the Attorney General of Idaho. Not a lot of people thought that somebody who was born in Puerto Rico would become the Attorney General in Idaho. Okay, so Republicans are doing really well with the Hispanics, and that will portend itself to do well in both Arizona and Nevada for Republicans.
And Leslie, it's a fair point because, you know, you look at what's happening in Florida and you look at what happened in Miami-Dade County, and then you look at Nevada and you look at Clark County, and you think, you know, maybe there's a point to be had there if this thing turns around and if Adam Laxalt can take this race because of a push among some Hispanics in Nevada, which is a growing part of the population, especially in Clark County, then, you know, there's an argument to be had.
Latinos don't all vote with one mind, and Florida and Nevada are two very different states, and these are very different candidates. I wouldn't agree with that. You have to look at the issues that, you know, yet again, 3 states, Colorado, Nevada, and New Mexico, Latinos consider abortion to be their number 2 issue next to the economy and inflation. And you have a female Democrat who is, you know, pro-choice and talking against the Dobbs decision. And you have a lot more youth coming out to vote state by state. Nevada is no exception. I don't think the fat lady's getting on stage to sing yet when it for a Republican victory.
I want to put this back up on the screen because we just showed another flash. This is the Nevada Senate race. Look at this now, Jason. I mean, you've got 48.2% for Laxalt, Cortez Masto now at 49%. That thing is with 62% of the vote counted. And most of that vote is coming from Clark County. And so a lot of those outlying counties, and Nevada has a bunch of them that are on the Arizona border, on the California border, up near, you know, Lake Tahoe and those areas that are very, very conservative. That right there is a very good sign for Adam Laxalt, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, Utah borders Nevada, and I got to tell you, those numbers come in huge. They're smaller counties, smaller populations. Like 90% of Nevada is owned by the state and federal government, so people just can't flat out live there. But I got to tell you, Laxalt will dominate there. I think Laxalt wins that race, particularly when you got 38% of the vote that hasn't even come in yet.
And we talked.
You would not want to be the Democrat at this point. I think she loses.
And we talked a lot about this. Is in the next neighboring state in Arizona. Still, a lot of that vote still has not been counted in Maricopa County, and who knows what happens to that race between Mark Kelly and Blake Masters. But it all comes down to Georgia. Then, if they can pick up Nevada, then it all comes down to Georgia, Leslie, and the Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock race, which is looking like it's very much going to go to a runoff on December 6th. Leslie, give us 30 seconds and we'll get you out of here.
I would say it's probably definitely going to go to a runoff, so we're going to have a nail biter. And I think we always knew it was going to come down to Georgia, didn't we? I think that's something Democrats and Republicans could agree on. But I still think my party is going to maintain control of the Senate.
Well, okay. We're all kind of all the GOP whistling past the graveyard, and all of a sudden there's new life. Like, wait, who won? Wait a minute, is this a fight again? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Thank you, everybody. Much more ahead on our special election coverage as it continues right here on the Fox News Channel. Welcome back to continuing coverage of breaking news, Democracy 2022. Let's talk some more about how results are shaping up tonight in the western states with our main man in the Pacific Northwest, KTTH Seattle Talk radio host Jason Rantz. I wanted to put this up, and I was going to bring some other guys into the argument here, Jason, but I find this fascinating. We talked about Oregon and we talked about Seattle. I know you're very well versed in what's going on down in Nevada, and all of a sudden, this race between Cortez Masto and Laxalt is a nail biter. We're talking about a less than, 7/10 of a point. I mean, he was down by 5 points last time we looked, 0.7 of a point, 62% of the voters are in, which means that a lot of these outlying counties, Clark County, a bunch there, but a lot of these outlying counties and up north near the Utah border and the northern California border and the southern Arizona border, that's where a lot of these votes lie, and they're conservative. Your thoughts on this, Jason?
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the numbers coming in and what hasn't yet come in, it's clearly trending in the direction of Adam Laxalt. And there's a reason why we haven't seen a lot of Democrats right now pointing to Nevada and calling this a done deal, because they realize every single time we got a dump of new data, it was trending in his direction. So it certainly is looking good for him. I expect that he will, in fact, end up winning this. And to your point in the last segment, then it all comes down to Georgia, depending on what happens in Arizona.
Right.
Arizona is also a really important state here, as we're getting some more numbers coming in from Maricopa County, and understand that because of a lot of the issues earlier today with the tabulation machines, there are a ton of votes that haven't yet been counted that were cast today.
Right.
And I do think that you're going to start to see that trend also in the Republican direction. Now, does Blake Masters have enough? Does Kari Lake have enough? I don't know, but it's certainly going to get incredibly tight. And I think that that's an important one to watch as well.
Yeah, and it's a good point here because, Mark, you know, Kari Lake is way behind in the polling that we just showed, and she's not way behind the polls. The polls are off. The polls haven't been great, but she's not 20 points down. She's not 16 points down. So somewhere there are some votes to be made up for her.
Absolutely. I think we see it both in the Senate race and in the gubernatorial race, that something's not right there. The polling isn't that far off. Right. And so, to Jason's point, I think when we start to see those ballots that they were having problems with earlier in the day start to come in Maricopa County, we could see a similar closing of the gap in Arizona like we saw in Nevada. Question is are there enough votes left to do it?
Yeah, and that is a great question because, you know, Kevin, you look at this whole thing, and it's a good thing we kept the lights on and kept the doors open because there's movement, right? There is some excitement happening. We don't know what's going to happen in Arizona. Nevada is certainly getting a lot closer, and it really does look like Georgia is going to a runoff.
And that's what we're hearing from state officials in the Peach State, that it is likely to head to that runoff in the next 4 weeks, of course. But the polls are the results are tightening in a must-win state for both Democrats and Republicans, and that's that Nevada Senate seat. And you're seeing some of those rural results come in. That's taking Adam Laxalt up against Catherine Cortez Masto. About 20% is still outstanding in Clark County, where you see the vast majority of the population in that state. But it's a jump ball right now, and Laxalt is certainly closing strong. Yeah,
and Jason, you know, when you look at these things, it's interesting to me that if you look at the whole map of the West Coast and you go up to where you are in Washington State and you go to Oregon, and some of these issues that we gave up, like, well, you know, it didn't look like Latino women and Latinos were going toward the Republicans, or black voters going toward Republicans, or white suburban women. Well, you look at Arizona and you look at Nevada and you look at what's happening up in your neck of the woods, and maybe a little more of that is becoming accurate as the night goes on.
Absolutely. And again, I don't think we should sleep on some of these House races that have not yet been called and won't get called in Washington and Oregon for the next couple days. I think Matt Larkin in Washington's 8th is going to end up being a Republican pickup. I think you look at Lori Chavez DeRemer in Oregon, and that's going to be a pickup for the Republicans as well. And something to just throw out there, as we've been having this conversation about the mayoral race, where it's still neck and neck. You go into the Portland City Commission. This is their city council. You have Renee Gonzalez way ahead of Joanne Hardesty. Now, she is one of the leaders and was the biggest proponent of the defund police movement. And so we've been getting some mixed messages as to what role crime played in these elections. And I think you look into Portland, and this is one of those cases where there is a glass half full approach that Republicans can take here. Not that Renee Gonzalez is a Republican, but he's been running this campaign on being tougher on crime, tougher on the homelessness situation, and he's seeing some good results.
Yeah, and not that I'm not looking at Jason, but I keep kind of scanning to the right-hand side here, gentlemen. You know why? Because I just saw the Nevada Senate race go by, and it looks to me, if we see it again, where Laxalt is 1/10 of 1 point behind as the vote continues to go there. There it is. 1/10 of what I see. I get good eyes.
This is a nail biter.
This is 1/10 of 1 point with 66% of the vote in there. And keep in mind that over the past 13 or 14 percentage points, as it has grown, you see Cortez Masto has barely budged, and Adam Laxalt is moving and closing the gap tightener. That is fascinating. Stand by, everyone. Results are still coming in tonight. Stay tuned to Fox News as our special election coverage continues. Welcome back to continuing coverage. Let's turn to the national political reporter for the Washington Examiner, Selena Zito. Selena, since we last talked a few moments ago, I've been kind of watching this Nevada race. I'm fascinated by it now because now it's almost a dead heat. I mean, Adam Laxalt, I'm speaking of, is 1/10 of 1 point behind. And we've been watching this over the past 90 minutes. You see it right there. And you can see right there, I can't see, but it says they are, where's the number? 385 votes apart, right? 385 votes apart is unbelievable at this point in the game. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's this election night probably didn't turn out the way a lot of people thought it would, including myself. The polling was a little bit off, but you know, in some states there were these big waves in places that where you don't expect Republicans to win, and in other places where Republicans should have won, it was no contest. I think Nevada favors, Laxalt is a little bit of the favorite, as they say in the Midwest, a scooch of a favorite. But you know, we shall see. This is good. This is just going to be a nail biter for probably for the next few hours and maybe into the next day.
And who knows? We just talked about Arizona, and we said, who knows? You talk about a nail biter there. That thing is gonna tighten up, and a lot of the vote is still out. And a lot of Maricopa County is where a lot of conservatives are, and so you have not only the Kari Lake race going on there, but you also have the Mark Kelly Blake Masters race going on. And when that thing tightens up, all of a sudden the Senate is a brand new conversation.
Yeah, I don't think there are Democrats or Republicans that are looking at what's happening tonight and said, well, I definitely saw that coming. Because I think everything's just sort of turned upside down. I mean, in a true wave election, parties can run on one, two or three things nationally, and it works. But I think if there's a lesson from this election this evening, is that place mattered, and that coalitions were formed in different places but didn't pan out in other places. And I think we really need to be thoughtful and unpack what exactly happened over the next few weeks.
Yeah, because Florida turned out exactly the way Republicans thought and wanted it to, and so did Texas, and so did Georgia, right? I mean, Georgia, what was the voter oppression in Georgia, right? What happened is that, there was no voter oppression, and suppression, rather. And the Major League Baseball authorities took the All-Star game out of there because they thought there was, and they had this huge voter turnout, and it got Brian Kemp back in office, and right now the Senate race is a nail-biter. Selena Zito, great to see you as always. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks.
Let's bring back in Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. I want to check in Montana on the Ryan Zinke House District 1 race on that. What are you hearing, Jason?
So Montana used to have one congressional district, but after the census, they now have two. Ryan Zinke, the former Interior Secretary, is running. That race is within like 400 votes of each other. But the late voting, the voting that happens the day of, tends to go to the Republican side of the aisle. I think Zinke pulls that off. Does not portend good things for John Tester, who's up 2 years from now. Yeah. But I think that is actually going to go Republican, along with Steve Daines there in the Senate, and Governor Gianforte, who's there as a Republican. But that's a new seat that has never been filled before.
And since you brought it up, I'll go there with you, because the 2024 map is a lot more generous to Republicans than the 22 map was.
Yeah. Thank goodness. I mean, you're right. I mean, look, how can these votes, Trace, not get counted? You look at the competency of Florida. They got all their votes. The election, it was called, And it's a huge state, and they got that done by like 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Right.
And Arizona looks like it's going to go on for who knows how long. I mean, it's inexcusable how bad they are in terms of counting in Arizona.
And I don't know if you saw it, Jason, but you know the Senate race in Nevada is now, I mean, it's now dead even. I mean, we've got 62% of the vote counted, maybe even a little bit more. And last check, they were 350 or 385 votes apart. Look at that board. He was down by 4 points about 90 minutes ago, and there was 53% of the vote. Now 66% in, 385 votes separate them. And if you are the Cortez Masto team, you are nervous now because you know a lot of these votes coming in are coming in from conservative areas.
Yeah, the 2nd Congressional District of Nevada, Mark Amodei is the incumbent there. Less than half of the vote is come in that district. You take the top half of Nevada, and he's winning by a 60-40 margin. So that's got to tell you that most of those votes are probably going to Laxalt, and they haven't even counted half of them in a congressional district. So Laxalt numbers is on the right trajectory.
Just got interesting again, Jason. Thank you, and thank you for watching our special midterm election coverage. I'm Trace Gallagher in Washington, D.C. Fox and Friends First is now. I'll see you on Fox News at 9.
We are exactly where we want to be in this race. We have a lot of our votes coming in all across the state yet to be tabulated. We are going to win this race.
I am so grateful to all of you for being here and for standing with us here in Nevada. We are not done yet.
We always knew that this race would be close. So y'all just hang in there. I'm feeling good.
I want to thank everybody in the campaign staff, and let's wait for all the numbers to come in, and then we'll declare victory.
A big election night continuing to unfold this morning. You're watching Fox and Friends First here on a Wednesday. I'm Todd Pyron.
And I'm Carly Shimkus. Here is where things stand right now. 68 seats are still up for grabs in the House. Republicans are inching closer to securing 218 seats and flipping the lower chamber. Right now, the GOP total tallying 200, Democrats 168.
To the Senate, where 4 seats still up in the air this morning, each party with 48 wins in their column. Democrat John Fetterman projected to beat Republican Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania's Senate race, but Republicans notching a win in Ohio, where J.D. Vance claims victory over Democrat Tim Ryan.
And still anyone's game in Georgia, where Democrat Raphael Warnock is ahead of Herschel Walker by less than 1%. Down in Arizona, incumbent Senator Mark Kelly holding a 9-point lead ahead of Republican Blake Masters, but only 58% of the vote is counted there. Another nail-biter in Nevada. Incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto and Adam Laxalt jockeying for the job, roughly 400 votes standing between the two candidates in that race right now.
And the final Senate race we are waiting on is Wisconsin, where Senator Ron Johnson is ahead of Mandela Barnes by only 1.5%. Brooke Singman has the very latest. Brooke.
Hey, good morning. Democrat Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman defeats Republican candidate Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania's Senate race. Now, Fetterman delivering his victory speech early this morning. Listen.
We jammed them up. We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do. That's why I'll be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania.
In Ohio, Republican J.D. Vance defeats Democrat candidate Tim Ryan for the Senate seat by 6%, a wider margin than predicted. Now, here's Vance late last night.
Whether you voted for me or not, the thing that I promise to do is go to the United States Senate and fight every single day for the people of Ohio. Thanks to you, we get an opportunity to do just that. I will never forget the great people of Ohio. Thank you for this honor to serve you. I'll fight for you every day. God bless you guys, and thank you.
Republican Ted Budd defeating former North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Sherry Beasley by 3% in the state's Senate race. Budd delivering his victory speech also late last night. Watch.
Well, thank you, North Carolina. You know, as someone who was born and raised here in North Carolina, this state's part of me. It's in my bones. and I want to make the old North State that much better again.
But it is still too close to call in some of the biggest Senate races, including Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Democrat candidate Raphael Warnock holding a narrow lead over Republican candidate Herschel Walker in Georgia. In Arizona, Republican Blake Masters is trailing behind Mark Kelly, but we do expect a longer delay in results from this state after reports of ballot glitches in up to 30% of polling sites. Now, in Nevada, Republican Adam Laxalt is neck and neck with Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto by a very narrow margin. Laxalt speaking earlier this morning, still feeling optimistic.
We are exactly where we want to be in this race. We have a lot of our votes coming in all across the state yet to be tabulated. We are going to win this race.
As it stands in the Senate, both Democrats and the GOP have 48 seats. 51 are needed for the majority. Now, things can change quickly, guys, so we will keep you updated as results come in. Carly?
It certainly can. Brooke, excellent wrap up there. We're going to continue to watch those tight races, but the race wasn't so tight in Florida, where Senator Mark Rubio beat Democrat Val Demings by double digits.
Governor Ron DeSantis also coming up with a huge win for his second term. Anita Vogel live in D.C. with more on that victory and other governor's races across our nation. Anita.
Yes, Todd and Carly, good morning. There was a red wave in Florida. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis cruising to a huge victory, ending the night with a 20-point lead. The Republican easily defeating Democrat Charlie Crist, even flipping Miami-Dade County, which hadn't been won by a GOP candidate in 20 years. DeSantis thanking the state's newest residents, saying they came to Florida to escape extreme policies in Democrat strongholds. Listen.
Americans have been voting for many years now. They've been voting with their feet. The woke agenda has caused millions of Americans to leave these jurisdictions for greener pastures. Florida is where woke goes to die.
Americans have been voting for many years now. Oh, sorry, excuse me. And in New York, Republicans' Lee Zeldin's bid for governor fell short as incumbent Democrat Kathy Hochul wins her first full term. Despite the projected loss, Zeldin has not yet conceded the race.
You'll also see all sorts of Election Day votes coming in from all across the rest of the state in areas that we have been doing great all day. So that's a little bit of the recap of where we're at. Obviously, we'd love to be out here when all the votes had been cast, but that's where we're at.
In Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp is reelected, defeating Democrat Stacey Abrams for the second time.
I can't tell you how honored I am to be your governor for the next 4 years. Tonight, hard-working Georgians from all walks of life spoke with a clear voice. They know which direction they want their state to go, and it is forward.
And Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer holding on for another term after a fierce challenge from Republican Tudor Dixon. Tight races for governor in Arizona, Nevada, and Oregon are still too close to call, and some of these races will not be called for days. Carly and Todd.
Anita Vogel live for us this morning. Anita, thank you. Over in Arizona, Democrat gubernatorial candidate Katie Hobbs currently leading Republican Kari Lake about 51 to 48%, more like 49%. That's with more than half the state's counties reporting. Election officials say they don't expect, though, to count all of the ballots in Arizona until Friday. That's after 30% of voting sites in Maricopa County saw ballot glitches just an hour into voting. They say printers weren't producing dark enough marks on ballots. A judge then ruling against GOP lawmakers trying to extend voting hours for voters affected by the glitches, ruling that there was no evidence that the errors suppressed voting. But look at that crazy long line seen outside Maricopa County voting sites, including this one in Scottsdale. Fox News voter analysis finds economy remaining the most important issue for voters by a huge margin. Look at that. 61% blame Joe Biden's policies for the inflation crisis. Moving over to the crime crisis, 51% say they feel less safe under the current administration. In the classroom, voters say public schools put their focus too much on unnecessary woke issues, with 52% saying there's too much emphasis on topics like gender identity. And 51% say discussions of sexual orientation are not appropriate for ages K through 8.
Republicans are still 18 seats away from taking control of the House, and Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is confident they're going to do it.
When you wake up tomorrow, we will be in the majority and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority. The American people are ready for a majority that will offer a new direction, that will put America back on track. Republicans are ready to deliver it. It's a new direction towards an economy that is strong, where you can fill up your tank, feed your family, where your paychecks grow and not shrink. A new direction towards a nation that is safe, where communities are protected, law enforcement is respected, and criminals are prosecuted.
Jim McLaughlin, president and partner of McLaughlin and Associates, joins me now to break down where things really stand. Jim, what a night. So balance of power, 218. Republicans have 200 seats right now. Democrats have 168. Where do things stand right now? What races are you watching as well?
As Leader McCarthy said, at the end of the day here, Republicans are going to be in control of Congress. And that's a good thing, because that's one of the things that we were seeing the voters really wanted. They wanted a check and balance on Joe Biden and the Democrats' policies.
Right.
So, and I think what we're going to see is, you know, one of the things that's going on now, unfortunately, we used to be able to decide elections in basically one night. Now we're voting for weeks.
It's election week, election month.
And look at the comparison. You look at a place like Florida tonight, and we saw it in the 2020 presidential election. They vote early in person, they vote by mail, and they also show up on Election Day. They're telling us by 9:30, 10 o'clock who won, who lost. Why can't we do that in other parts of the country? Right. And what's going on in Maricopa County in Arizona, when you have two big governors and Senate races, it's just totally unacceptable.
Yeah, there were some major issues with the tabulating machines. Republicans tried to sue to get 3 extra hours of voting there, but a judge said no. More to come out of Arizona. We'll get to that in a little bit. Kevin McCarthy said that we're on the verge of historic gains in New York. You mentioned Florida. He said we gained 4 seats alone, poised to win the entire state of Iowa. He also pointed out several House races that he thought were really special. Monica De La Cruz won in Virginia, won at the southern border in Texas. Yep. Jen Higgins picked up Virginia Beach in Detroit. John James, Houston, Wesley Hunt. There are also some New York races. Yep. When it comes to Mike Lawler beating the head of the DCCC, that is a big win. Even though Lee Zeldin ended up losing to Kathy Hochul, that's a big pickup there.
And I'll tell you something. Republicans nationally in New York, they owe Lee Zeldin a huge debt of gratitude, because at the end of the day, it looks like we're going to pick up at least 4 congressional seats in New York. That doesn't happen without Lee Zeldin at the top of the ticket. Yeah. Places like Mike Lawler, George Santos, Anthony D'Esposito that all won. Lee Zeldin won in those districts by significant margins. And what we're seeing in the polling was, for the most part, Lee Zeldin and those Republican congressional candidates were getting the similar vote to what Lee got.
Right. So, like I said, before we go on to the Senate, you need 218, obviously, to take control of the House. What number do you think is ultimately going to happen for Republicans versus Democrats? Where do things stand in the end?
I think they're probably going to wind up in that 222 range right now. And again,
which is kind of where Democrats are right now, so it could be sort of a flip.
That's exactly right. But it's an important flip because, again, at the end of the day, you know, Congress controls the spending, and that's one of the things that's been fueling inflation here. So I think it'll give the Republicans a lot of power.
Should Republicans feel deflated about the margins?
Look, I think Republicans, you know, they're going to be upset because they didn't get it, but they still have an opportunity to get the Senate. If they get the Senate, they get the House, they can actually do some big things.
Let's head on over there.
Yeah.
What races are you watching still? Still 4 up for grabs.
Oh, this
48-48.
Yeah, and I think Ron Johnson's going to win in Wisconsin. And I think Nevada right now, you've got, you know, Adam Laxalt has that small lead right now. And again, I think you're looking at it in Arizona.
I mean, look at that margin. Yeah. It's just a tenth of a difference between the two, with 66% in. It was looking like Adam Laxalt was going to take it. Then Catherine Cortez Masto sort of inched ahead for a little bit. Now Laxalt's back in the lead. So do you think that Republicans are going to take this seat?
Look, I think it's really close at the end of the day, but I think Adam Laxalt is going to persevere here because there's a lot of votes, I think, out in Clark County, which is more
Las Vegas.
Exactly, and it's a more Republican area, and that's also where the gubernatorial candidate, Joe Lombardo, was from. He was the sheriff there, and I think he's run pretty strong there, and that's helped Adam Laxalt.
They really say that Nevada is sort of a tale of two cities in one state, because look at all this red, and then you have Las Vegas, which has about the same amount of votes as the rest of the state.
That's exactly right. And I think one of the things you're going to see when you look at the exit polls when they come out, one of the reasons why Adam Laxalt and Joe Lombardo, the candidate for governor, did well was because of Hispanic voters.
Okay, so we're at 48-48. Say, for instance, Republicans pick up Nevada. What do you think about Arizona, first of all, before we just make somewhat of a prediction there? We see Mark Kelly in the lead, but 61% reported. What do you think?
It looks like he's up by about 7% right now.
Do you think this goes to Kelly?
But again, not sure. And the reason why we're not sure at this point in time is because all those problems in Maricopa County. And again, that's a Republican area. And I was talking to some folks on the ground. They tell me not only is it, Maricopa, more Republican area, but where they were having the problems seemed to be in the Republican areas. So I think it's one of those, look, we got to wait and see, make sure and let the process play out.
In the game of pretend, say, for instance, Republicans pick up Nevada, Wisconsin, Democrats pick up Arizona, then it all goes down to Georgia.
Again.
The devil went down to Georgia, and in this case, the devil is a runoff election. Do you see that happening?
Again, I think it's probably almost assuredly going to become a runoff between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker again. And I think it's going to be really interesting because it was, last time, the Democrats won, but it was super, super close. And we look at it right now. We look at how close it is and all the money that's been spent in that race.
I mean, a historic amount of money for it to be this tight. Runoffs historically favor Republicans. It didn't last time. But if the runoff election is to happen again, I was reading a 538 article. They said that if runoff happens, then Walker would have the advantage there. So something certainly to watch.
Yep, and I think there's a lot of truth to that because the interesting part was that whole check and balance message last time didn't really work for the Republicans because the voters viewed Joe Biden at that time as a check and balance. But now, because he's moved so far to the left, we've got problems with our economy, problems with crime, problems with the border. I think the check and balance message could be what puts...
More to come. Like you said, we got the election night, then the week, possibly the month. Jim, thank you so much. You're going to stick around, come back and check in with us next hour, right?
Looking forward to it.
Excellent. All right, we're talking more about that Georgia race coming up next.
Georgia's Senate race between Republican candidate Herschel Walker and Democrat Senator Raphael Warnock, one of 4 Senate races, still too close to call.
And guess what? Neither candidate topping 50% just yet, with 98% of the vote counted. Speak Georgia Inc. co-founder Janelle King joins us now. Janelle, wow. What do you think about this race, and is it going to go to a runoff?
You know what? I absolutely do think it's going to go to a runoff, but I have to say congratulations to our governor, to our lieutenant governor, A.G. Carr, all the way down to our labor commissioner, Bruce Thompson. I'm so excited. But I do think this is going to go to a runoff. I think what this race is showing us, though, is that the surveying polling was a little off, but I don't think internal polling was. I've said numerous times that I felt like the momentum on the Republican side was very interesting. I feel like I was hearing a lot about the governor and not so much about Herschel Walker. So I do think that this is something that's not too surprising. However, the abortion, we found out that the abortion topic was a bit of a wild card in both races, and a little bit of a challenge for Herschel to overcome. However, we are now in a position where all eyes will be on Georgia. I do believe that it's going to come down to Georgia more than likely, and that's going to have to drive momentum and drive turnout. This is going to be a lot. This is going to really be focused on turnout.
Okay, so if we do get to this runoff, who do you think has the advantage?
So traditionally, Republicans have the advantage, and I do think that Herschel Walker is going to go into this with the advantage. It really depends on if we pick up a Senate seat in another state or not. But I do think that as long as it comes all the way down to Georgia and that the Senate is hanging in the balance between what happens here, I do think that that's going to favor Herschel Walker.
We talked a lot about how Brian Kemp's popularity in Georgia could have been lifting Herschel Walker up. Stacey Abrams did not win. It wasn't even close. Could her lack of popularity be dragging Raphael Warnock down?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, we said that last night, my husband and I. We were talking about how it looks like Stacey Abrams was a bit of an anchor, as well as, some people may say that the vice versa, because Herschel Walker didn't get nearly as much as Governor Kemp. But I do think that Stacey Abrams' rhetoric is really pushing people away from the Democratic Party, and it's making them question all of the candidates because they're waiting to hear something different, and they're not. So with Warnock going into this race, what I do believe is that Democrats are going to stick with the Democrat, and I think Republicans are going to stick with their Republican. So that means that this is going to, the swing is going to be dependent upon the independents. So now we're going to have to hear and see what the message is to independents and how does that resonate.
I feel like this is a storm system where you have competing factors at play going against each other. It's going to lead to a wild December 6th if and when the runoff ultimately happens. Focusing on Stacey Abrams for a moment, Janelle, is this it for her? Is her political career done, or is she going to pull a Beto and try to run unsuccessfully for something for a third time?
She may, but I believe her political career is done. I think it was done a long time ago. I think it started when she said that, Georgia was the worst place to live. So I do feel like it's done. I don't see her going anywhere. Congratulations to Kim. He really defeated this situation, defeated Goliath, and he did it twice. So I think that there's definitely big kudos to our governor.
Yeah. And some of her parting words on the campaign trail that have gotten a lot of attention were the fact that she said that black male voters have been fed misinformation, and some people interpreted that as a real knock against black men in the state. And she also, during the debate, said that she's not a part of the good old boys club when she was trying to make the argument that she's pro-police. And it seems like that sort of rhetoric does not work in Georgia.
No, not at all. My husband started the campaign Kings for America, as he's the chairman of Let's Win for America Action. And Kings for America is definitely focusing in on the black male population, but all men in general, is making sure that we are hearing their needs and hearing their concerns. Because I do think that the black male population is like a forgotten segment of voters, because we tend to bring out the black men when it comes to police brutality or crime and every other negative stereotype. However, they have something to say, and they're saying it today. And I said it last night, definitely for Stacey Abrams, but it just shows that you can't fall back on this. You can't continue to call men toxic and then blame masculinity as to the reason why they're not supporting you. You have to have more, and that's what this is saying. So we're going to continue to work on this. I know my husband with kingsforamerica.com, we're going to really be focusing in on this pocket, and hopefully we can see some results in December.
85% of voters found increasing violent crime rates an important factor when voting. Stacey Abrams was tied to the defund the police movement. How much did that lose her this race?
Oh, my goodness. I think that hurt her terribly. The fact of the matter is, when I talk to single moms who are in low-income communities, they most certainly want the police to be funded. And that is something that is important. And so while she's spinning this rhetoric, it only speaks to the gatekeepers and those who are living behind gates, and not to those who are actually living in these communities. It just shows her lack of attachment to the people that she's claiming to serve.
Janelle, real quick answer from you, because we got to roll, but do you see a presidential run in Brian Kemp's future?
It's so funny. We were talking about that yesterday as well. I do believe that if he continues to stay on the track that he's on, if he has another wonderful 4 years, I absolutely can see him doing that. But I'm not, that's my words. There's nothing I've heard from him. But I definitely can see it happening.
And he's busy celebrating his victory right now. Janelle King, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Janelle.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Republican George Santos flipping his district in deep blue New York as Republicans inch closer to control of the House.
And this morning, George Santos here live.
Republican George Santos flipping New York's 3rd District red, defeating his Democrat challenger Robert Zimmerman.
George Santos joins us now, coming off his big victory. George, let us be the first to congratulate you officially on your win. Why? Why did you win? What issue was it that drove you to victory?
You know, I kept the entire race, guys, and thank you for having me here, but I kept the entire race about the people. I kept it about the issues that were hurting Americans here in the 3rd District, whether it's inflation, whether it's crime, whether it's the high cost of energy and education for our kids. That's what my campaign was all about. While my opponent spent his entire campaign smearing me, I spent it making it about the people, and the people spoke louder. When you run a campaign and you don't offer real ideas or solutions to the problems at hand, you can't win. This isn't a matter of red or blue, Republican or Democrat. It's a matter of right and wrong. We had the right message. My opponent had the wrong message.
Well, President Biden won your district by 10 points 2 years ago. So for you to be able to flip this seat red is no small feat. What is your reaction to the governor's race? A lot of Republicans were hoping that Lee Zeldin would take it. Kathy Hochul ended up winning by 5 points.
Well, look, the way I look at it is what my good friend Lee Zeldin has done with this race, and I still think it's probably one of the most successful races we could have imagined. Never in a million years could we thought that we'd get this close. I just hope that New Yorkers and Democrats elected across the state that survive their elections remember that there's a big part of this state that does not want to be ruled with a iron fist like they've been doing, and maybe they start to put out policies that keep us safer, that give us more prosperity. Again, Zeldin has not conceded in the race. I know most projections are showing him to be defeated by Kathy, but I do want to give him the opportunity to concede, and I want every ballot to be counted. As we can see, Suffolk County has to do a hand count due to some cyber attacks that they've been experiencing. So let's wait and see until the final vote comes in. But again, even if he loses by 5 or 4 points, I think he had a successful race. I think he ran an incredible campaign that New York was not expecting, nor was the Democrats. And that's what it's all about. It's about participating and giving it your all, and he gave it his all.
Well, George, a lot of those New Yorkers worried about freedom left New York. They moved to Florida. And you look at the vote total there for Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis blew Charlie Crist out of the water. So if those individuals had stayed in New York, would the result of Zeldin's race be different?
One can argue that, yes, that the population loss that we had, including losing a congressional seat due to that severe population loss of the state of Florida, could have resulted in a victory. That's why we had that entire slogan throughout the campaign, bet and lead, don't flee. Unfortunately, a lot of people were at wit ends and they just had no choice. And that's what happens when you're ruled under oppression in a state like New York. But I have faith that this is going to set the state in a different direction, and that these folks in Albany are going to look at this as a real telling story for them. Look, we picked up 3 seats on Long Island in the Republican Party. We picked up every congressional seat on Long Island went Republican. That has to mean Patrick Maloney losing his seat has to mean something. They have to be cognizant of what they're doing.
Yeah, and speaking of being cognizant of what they're doing, George, just think about what Kathy Hochul had to do to be able to win the race. I mean, this is deep blue New York, and she had to call in the big guns. The president, the Clintons, Hillary and Bill Clinton, Vice President Kamala Harris, they all rallied for her. The issue with this race was, the top issue was crime. So do you think moving forward, because of in New York, I guess you could call a 5-point margin of victory a narrow divide, considering she was up by double digits. Do you think that she will change her tune when it comes to crime? She said several months ago that she would look at bail reform in January, assuming that she would be reelected. Where do you think things go when it comes to those bail reform policies moving forward?
If she wants to be a good governor and wants to hold her oath to office honorably, she should repeal bail reform, and she should fire Alvin Bragg immediately, tomorrow. If she wants to gain voter confidence and she wants to get the confidence of the millions of people who voted for Lee Zeldin and the same millions of people who voted to elect Republicans like myself to the House of Representatives and members of the New York State Senate and Assembly, she needs to get on this right now. And unfortunately, I have little confidence that she will. Like I said, I hope that they realize that this footing was not something that just was, they did not get handed this victory. This victory was hard fought for her, and it shouldn't have been in the first place. Like I said, my friend Zeldin,
all right, I think we're
and gave them the run for their money. Hell, they had to bring out Cher for an endorsement.
They did. Bring out Cher. There you go. George
It was
Santos,
in all caps.
congrats to you on your victory. Don't be a stranger. Check back in with us when
Thank
you're
you.
on the Hill.
And get some
change.
sleep.
And get
I
some
bet
sleep.
you you haven't gone to
Thank
bed
you,
yet. So you could do that now. Thank you
that's
for joining
true.
us. I figured as much. Congratulations. All right, a lot of surprises on election night, but one thing has stayed the same. Voters say the economy is their top concern, and most of them blame the Biden administration for record high inflation.
Our political power panel, Joe Concha, Mercedes Schlapp, Brian Brandberg, here next.
As results pour in across the country, Fox News voter analysis spells trouble for the Biden administration. Nearly 3/4 of the country is headed in the wrong direction, and most say Biden is to blame for the inflation crisis. Kevin Cork is live in Washington with the details. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning. You know, it's actually it's a chill kind of morning, I imagine, for the president, who no doubt, like the rest of us, was watching the returns come in last night, and he had to go to bed probably feeling pretty positive about how things went for his party, especially when compared with most of the predictions coming into the big race. In fact, we found out the president had a chance to tell some of the winners in his party, the victors, and yep, he was very excited about how the night went. He said this on Twitter. Just got off the phone with some of tonight's winners. He doesn't have an accent. Including some folks I saw on the road this year. If you're in line to vote, remember to stay in line. Of course, that was earlier. So pleasantries abound for high-level Democrats who, like the president, were no doubt reveling in the overwhelming early vote totals and mail-in ballots that appeared to give many of their candidates insurmountable leads and ultimately victories across the spectrum. But experts say it's not all champagne and strawberries over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Nope. In fact, with a likely loss looming in the House, at least in terms of leadership, it may be time to clean house.
I think there's going to be some meetings at the White House. If they change the staff, then I think the president's going to change the agenda. I think if he doesn't change the staff, I think they're going to stick to it. He wants to stick with his agenda. He does not want to change. He is not a Bill Clinton, whom I worked with, who did radically change after these kinds of results.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, Republicans who are, as you probably know, still holding out hope for a Senate majority, well, they continue to blame the president's policies for the midterm malaise among most Americans.
You think about 19 months of inflation outpacing pay increases. That means that Biden has delivered a pay cut to the American people. 8 months, over 8%. Devastating impact for people who grew up like I did in a single-parent household, working paycheck to paycheck.
The great Tim Scott, excellent at messaging. All right, let me take you inside the Fox News voter analysis. Feelings about how the U.S. government is working? Yeah, not so much. 75%, that's a whopping number, say they're either dissatisfied or angry. How about the most important issues facing the country? Again, our voter analysis showing that the economy continues to dominate. Immigration, abortion, climate change, well down the list there. You can also talk about crime and health care and guns, also on that list of things that people are concerned about. How about reasons for inflation? 54% say it's Biden policies. 46 say it's factors beyond his control. Okay, how about this? Do you think your local public K-8 schools are teaching too much, too little, or just about the right amount on issues related to sexual orientation? 51% say simply too much. 23 and 26 say either too little or about the right amount. All right, and I just want to add this too very quickly. People were asked if the administration was making you feel safer. And there was also this one about gender identity, as you see right there. People were wondering about, do you feel safer? We've talked about the crime issue. An overwhelming majority, 51%, said they feel less safe. And there's even more to it than that. A lot of people say they not only don't feel safe, they feel like things are getting worse, guys.
All right, Kevin Corrick live for us this morning. Kevin, thank you. With that, let us bring in our political power panel. Brian Remberg, Executive Vice President at the King's College and Associate Professor of Business and Economics. Fox News contributor Joe Concha and Mercedes Schlapp, CPAC Foundation Senior Fellow and former White House Director of Strategic Communications. Good morning to all three of you. So, heard Kevin Corrick mention it. The economy's bad. People know it's bad. So why did the status quo, i.e. incumbents, have such a surprisingly not horrible night?
That's the right word, surprisingly not horrible night. Let me tell you, because there really was a sense, and I traveled through many of these battleground states and talked with the grassroots activists. They were motivated. They were ready to go get these Republicans in office. The difference is that the Democrats outspent Republicans 2-to-1, 3-to-1 in so many of these races. From an organizational standpoint as well, they struggled to really be able to make sure they get out the vote efforts. That's something that's going to have to be reevaluated. With that being said, I'm very hopeful in Nevada. I'm very hopeful in Arizona with these Senate races, with the governor's races. I think they will go Republican. I can tell you with Adam Laxalt, his team, very organized. They were able to garner that Hispanic vote. He'll win in Nevada. And Blake Masters, he's going to come from behind. You're going to see he's going to take the Senate.
You're the prediction here first. Joe, when it comes to messaging, did Republicans in large part stay home because they thought they had it in the bag?
That's interesting, because every analysis we saw, even from Democratic pundits, said this thing was going to be a blowout. So perhaps the motivation went away. Two things I wouldn't want to be this morning: any pollster on the planet and any guy that created a company that said Red Wave 22, right? This wasn't even red wave. It's not even a red little ripple in a pond. And when you look at the conditions on the ground and everything that Kevin just described, inflation and crime and the border, opioid overdoses, education, everything lined up for Republicans, yet you see them underperforming the way they did. The big story last night, Todd, is what happened in Florida. And Ron DeSantis blowing out Charlie Crist, Marco Rubio cruising to victory, and then what happened in Georgia. Brian Kemp, the governor, easily beating Stacey Abrams. What do Kemp and DeSantis have in common? They both didn't rely in any capacity on Donald Trump to bring their victories home. And now you have to wonder, who really is the leader of the Republican Party right now? Is it the former president, or is it maybe DeSantis, Kemp, Youngkin, the new younger blood? We'll have to see.
We'll maybe get some answers on November 15th when Trump makes that announcement, potentially about a presidential run or maybe another announcement. We'll see. Brian, a lot of people are waking up this morning, probably conservative voters, thinking, uh-oh, we didn't have the night we wanted. But if and when Republicans get control of the House, Kevin McCarthy has already more or less declared victory. It does look like that's going to happen. What can Republicans do from an economic standpoint to stop the bleeding in our country?
Well, they can push back on every single one of the regulations that Joe Biden is planning to do or has done. Having the Senate would be really helpful for that. They need to be a roadblock. Look, if you're the minority party, you've got one house, you stand in the way every chance you get. The best you can hope for with divided government is gridlock. And I'll tell you right now, for this economy, gridlock's a heck of a lot better than the agenda that we've gotten. So markets are probably going to like that. But this definitely was not a red wave. If I'm watching anything, I'm watching Florida. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, where you are. That's where the resounding message was sent.
Well, Mercedes, let's focus on Florida. Is that the template going forward for 2024, 2026, 2028? Follow what Ron DeSantis did in Florida, campaign and govern like Ron DeSantis, and to a lesser extent, Brian Kemp in Georgia, and you'll have your victories.
So Florida has a very strong Republican Party, state party, in fact, and they were able to work on voter registration, and they led in the numbers of Republicans voting, registering to vote than Democrats. And I also think that his policies resonated with so many of these voters, including independent voters, which he was able to bring along. I would say Charlie Crist is a very weak candidate. So Ron DeSantis was obviously in a very strong position. With that being said, yes, I think the other states should look at what Florida did. I think the big disappointing state was Pennsylvania, where Republicans couldn't even win the congressional seats in that area. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing is Pennsylvania, which should be a purple state, looks pretty blue right now.
Yeah, when you post-mortem, I think Pennsylvania is on the top of that table.
That's
You're going to autopsy that and dissect it. Okay, enough of those analogies, even though your wife's a doctor. Yes. Joe, did Republicans have enough of a plan, articulate enough of a plan to actually solve problems and not just come out there and say, Democrats bad, vote for us?
That's the thing. You have to have a positive message. And yes, they hammered home inflation and they hammered home crime. But when you think about, okay, what is your solution? Okay, you say you're going to get rid of DAs that don't enforce the law, or on inflation, you're going to cut spending. But people have pretty good memories in this country, and they saw during the Trump administration, spending didn't exactly go away, right? It wasn't cutting down government like we saw under Reagan, for example. So perhaps people didn't like what they were seeing from Democrats, from Joe Biden, and everything they were feeling, but they felt that Republicans couldn't do any better, perhaps.
Brian chomping at the bit.
I tell you what was persuasive last night was a track record. If you had a great track record like Florida, you cleaned up. If you were out there making promises about things, but nobody really believed you could keep those promises, you didn't do so well.
Brian, it looked like if you had any track record as an incumbent, you did well regardless to a certain extent.
I did believe that. It is the night of the incumbent, and that is one of the resounding messages as well. A lot of these people, it's their first time running. I mean, you could even look at Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz. You go through the list, and they have struggled. They struggled, except for a J.D. Vance, which obviously did very well. Ohio is one of those states that we saw a strong governor with accomplishments being able to bring over with them a Republican senator as well.
Quickly, Brian, does inflation go down because Republicans have the House?
It takes a heck of a lot more than Republicans having the House to bring inflation down. America's still got that problem. This election didn't solve it.
Brian, Mercedes, Joe, you're coming back in the next hour. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Great insight. Carly, over to you.
All right, a big election night still unfolding this morning. 4 pivotal Senate seats are still uncalled in Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and of course, Wisconsin. Each party has 48 seats, and 68 seats are still up for grabs in the House. Republicans are inching closer to securing 218. That's the magic number there, flipping the lower chamber. One big winner was Corey Mills in Florida. He's here to talk about his victory, plus Leo Terrell and Laura Trump. Don't go anywhere.
We are exactly where we want to be in this race. We have a lot of our votes coming in all across the state yet to be tabulated. We are going to win this race.
I am so grateful to all of you for being here and for standing with us here in Nevada. We are not done yet.
We always knew that this race would be close. So y'all just hang in there. I'm feeling good.
I want to thank everybody in the campaign staff, and let's wait for all the numbers to come in, and then we'll declare victory.
A big election night still unfolding this morning. You are watching Fox and Friends First on this Wednesday. I'm Carly Shimkus.
And I'm Todd Pyro. Here is where things stand right now. 63 seats still up for grabs in the House. Republicans inching closer to securing 218 seats and flipping the lower chamber. Look at the board right now. GOP tallying 200, Democrats 172.
And in the Senate, where 4 seats are still up in the air, each party has 48 wins in their column. Democrat John Fetterman is projected to beat Republican Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania's Senate race, but Republicans notching a win in Ohio, where J.D. Vance claims victory over Democrat Tim Ryan.
And still anyone's game in Georgia, where Democrat Raphael Warnock is ahead of Herschel Walker by less than 1%. In Arizona, incumbent Senator Mark Kelly holding a roughly 6-point lead ahead of Republican Blake Masters, but only 62% of the vote is counted there. Another nail-biter in Nevada, incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto and Adam Laxalt jockeying for the job. Laxalt pulling ahead by over 20,000 votes.
And the final Senate race we are waiting on is in Wisconsin, where Senator Ron Johnson is ahead of Mandela Barnes by just over 8%. Brooke Singman has more on all of this. Brooke.
Hey, good morning, guys. Democrat Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman defeats Republican candidate Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania's Senate race. Now, Fetterman delivering his victory speech early this morning. Listen.
We jammed them up.
We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do. That's why I'll be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania.
Let's. J.D. Vance defeats Democrat candidate Tim Ryan for the Senate seat by 6%, a wider margin than originally predicted. Now, here's Vance late last night.
Whether you voted for me or not, the thing that I promise to do is go to the United States Senate and fight every single day for the people of Ohio. Thanks to you, we get an opportunity to do just that. I will never forget the great people of Ohio. Thank you for this honor to serve you. I'll fight for you every day. God bless you guys, and thank you.
And Republican Ted Budd defeating former North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Cheri Beasley by 3% in the state's Senate race. Budd delivering his victory speech late last night.
Well, thank you, North Carolina. You know, as someone who was born and raised here in North Carolina, this state's part of me. It's in my bones, and I want to make the old North State that much better again.
It's still too close to call in some of the biggest Senate races, including Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Democrat candidate Raphael Warnock holding a very narrow lead over Republican candidate Herschel Walker in Georgia, signaling a potential runoff. Now, in Arizona, Republican Blake Masters is trailing behind Mark Kelly, but we do expect a longer delay in results from this state after reports of ballot glitches in up to 30% of polling sites in that state. And in Nevada, Republican Adam Laxalt is gaining stronger lead over Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto, widening that margin. Laxalt speaking earlier this morning and still feeling optimistic.
We're in for a long night and maybe even a few days into this week as all the votes are tabulated, but we're confident that the numbers are there and we're going to win this race. We're going to take back Nevada and take back America. Thank you all.
As it stands in the Senate, both Democrats and the GOP have 48 seats. 51 are needed for the majority. And things can change quickly, guys, so we will keep you updated as more results come in. Carly, Todd.
All right, Brooke, thank you very much. It was a big night for incumbent governors down in Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis is Florida's future with a new nickname from the New York Post. He's winning by a landslide over Democrat challenger Charlie Crist, even flipping Miami-Dade County for the first time in more than 2 decades.
Today, after 4 years, the people have delivered their verdict. Freedom is here to stay.
And up in New York, Democrat Kathy Hochul is projected to keep her residence in the governor's mansion, beating Republican challenger Lee Zeldin, who is still not conceded.
I'm here to make a difference. And because of all of you, we'll keep making progress, breaking down barriers, breaking glass ceilings, helping New Yorkers achieve the greatness that it is capable of.
And in Georgia, Republican Governor Brian Kemp beating Democrat challenger Stacey Abrams for the second time, and he's taken a victory lap.
We stopped Stacey and saved Georgia. Tonight, hard-working Georgians from all walks of life spoke with a clear voice. They know which direction they want their state to go, and it is forward.
And in Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer edging out Republican challenger Tudor Dixon. We are still waiting for Arizona's results. Democrat gubernatorial candidate Katie Hobbs is currently leading Republican Kari Lake 51-49, with more than half of the state's counties reporting. Election officials say they don't expect to count all the ballots in Arizona until Friday. That's after 30% of voting sites in Maricopa County saw ballot glitches just an hour into voting. They say printers weren't producing dark enough marks on the ballots. A judge then ruling against GOP lawmakers trying to extend voting hours for voters affected by the glitches, ruling that there was no evidence that the errors suppressed voting. But look at the crazy long lines seen outside Maricopa County's voting sites, including this one in Scottsdale.
With that, Republicans still 18 seats away from taking control of the House, and Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is confident they're going to do it.
You wake up tomorrow, we will be in the majority, and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority. The American people are ready for a majority that will offer a new direction, that will put America back on track. Republicans are ready to deliver it. It's a new direction towards an economy that is strong, where you can fill up your tank, feed your family, where your paychecks grow and not shrink. A new direction towards a nation that is safe, where communities are protected, law enforcement is respected, and criminals are prosecuted.
Jim McLaughlin, president and partner of McLaughlin and Associates, back to break down the latest midterm results. Jim, great to have you back. You heard Kevin McCarthy there say when you wake up in the morning, for a lot of folks on the East Coast, it's 5 a.m., they're waking up in the morning. So let's go to the House. Potential speaker also echoing that he says Republicans will win the House. Do you echo that sentiment?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. It's just a question of how much do they win the House by at the end of the day. Do they win by 10 seats? Do they win by 20 seats? Because there's still over 60 seats that need to be decided here.
The reason I asked it in that way is I think a lot of people went to bed thinking they were going to see a red wave, and they woke up thinking, uh-oh, we don't have that. So they may have been a little bit nervous that were the predictors wrong on losing the House or potentially winning the House? Yeah. So going forward, what races are you focused on looking ahead to seeing how many more above 218 the Republicans can get?
Look, I think there's several races out there. And look, there's even some races in New York right now that are still pretty close, but it looks like the Republicans are going to keep those seats. I think we're going to look at some seats out here in California in some of those suburban areas, and also possibly even in Oregon and Washington State. So I think there's quite a few races here that are still up for grabs, and I think there's even another race or two in Texas that the Republicans may have a shot at getting.
I'd like to focus right now on the Senate, because one of the things you always like to do in our business is go to the thing that's new. And right now, at 5 a.m., we are seeing movement in the Laxalt-Cortez Masto rate. When we started our program, Cortez Masto had the lead. Now take a look. Laxalt is in the lead by about 22,000, almost 23,000, with 72% of the vote in. What counties, what areas of Nevada are you looking at going forward in the next couple of hours?
Yep. He's literally picked up about 25,000 votes since we went on the air this morning over the last hour. And I think what you really want to look at is Clark County right now. You know, that's the Las Vegas area down there in Clark County. There's still, it looks like, even though Clark County tends to be a little bit more Democratic, they're telling me where the votes are out are actually in some of the Republican areas. And Joe Lombardo, who's actually running slightly ahead of Adam Laxalt in the governor's race, he's ahead right now. He's the Clark County sheriff. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see the vote between both Lombardo and Laxalt is going to be pretty similar. And I'm looking forward to seeing the exit polls when this is all said and done, because I think one of the things we're going to see here is what seems to be putting Laxalt and Lombardo over the top are the Hispanic voters in Nevada right now.
Let's focus 80% here on the map, which means 20% still outstanding. As far as you know, Jim, does that 20% lean more Laxalt or Cortez Masto?
I think when you look at it, there's a lot of red in Nevada right now, again, with the exception of kind of that Clark County area there. So I think it's going to help. And as the night has gone on, what we've seen in a lot of these races, the Democrats are doing better with the early voting. And as you're seeing as the night goes on, the election day voting, the Republicans are doing better, significantly better. I saw some numbers that were the actual real numbers. Down in Florida, for instance, Republicans basically outnumbered Democrats on election day voting in Florida by about a 2-to-1 margin.
Still have to focus on Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia, but Nevada is the one where we're seeing vote totals change right now. Jim, thank you. Carly, over to you.
All right, Stacey Abrams can't say the election was stolen from her this time because Brian Kemp scored a decisive victory in the Georgia gubernatorial race. And don't forget, Abrams closed out her campaign by insulting law enforcement as good old boys. How much of a role did that play last night? We are asking Leo Terrell coming up next. Hello
Hello, good morning, my friends. I know we are talking about all of the election results, but you know what? We have a lot of weather happening. So we have a storm out west. We've got snow in the forecast, feet of it across the Sierra Nevada in towards the Rockies and the Intermountain West. And then we have the potential for a hurricane in the next 6 to 12 hours impacting the east coast of Florida. So this is Tropical Storm Nicole, 70-mile-per-hour winds, 74 miles per hour makes it a hurricane. We do think we're going to have a hurricane making impact overnight tonight, okay, into Thursday. We think, you know, south central Florida. Hurricane warnings for West Palm Beach all the way up to Daytona Beach. And then we have tropical storm warnings for much of the state of Florida, and then moving up towards the coastal areas of Georgia, South Carolina. And look at how big this storm is. So I think 200 miles from the center of circulation, we're talking about at least tropical storm force winds. Already seeing impacts of those outer bands moving across the eastern section of Florida. And we think a landfall around the Port St. Lucie area overnight into Thursday. And then we might see this area of low pressure dip into the Gulf of Mexico side, into the panhandle of Florida on Thursday afternoon. And then we watch this thing become a potential nor'easter for the Northeast this weekend. So heavy rainfall for the Sunshine State today, tomorrow. You could see 5 to 8 inches, a little pocket of 8 to 12 could be possible. And then we also have the tornado threat with this storm system as it moves inland. You know, the weak rotation could develop some weak tornadoes that could cause structural damage. And there's our nor'easter as we head into the weekend. So a big system that's going to impact millions of people. FoxWeather.com for your latest details.
My goodness. Major weather news.
Yes.
Major political
I'm very grateful that you included weather in your show today.
Absolutely. You have to. Janice, thank you so much.
See you later.
All right, absolutely. Let's bring in Fox News contributor and civil rights attorney Leo Terrell. Leo, what a night. And we do have some questions answered, but not all of them, because you see Republicans, Democrats in the Senate, 48-48. What are your top line thoughts right now? Where do you think this is all going?
Well, I'll tell you right now, thanks for having me, Todd and Carly. I'm glad the House will be Republican, and I think it's going to be key in Georgia. I like the results in Nevada with Adam Laxalt basically moving ahead. You see a possibility, Carly, of a Republican Senate, but you got the House, which means Biden and the progressive left wing will be neutralized or kept in check by a Republican House.
Let's focus on Georgia. You think if there is a runoff that Herschel Walker takes it over Raphael Warnock, that runoff potentially being on December 6th if neither of those candidates reaches 50% tonight?
Let me think about that. Yes, I think there's no doubt in my mind Herschel Walker will win a runoff. I think Republican voters will come out and basically not repeat what happened 2 years ago, Todd, when the 2 Senate seats went blue. We need a check on Biden. We need a check on the progressive left. And I think Herschel Walker will prevail in a runoff in December.
You know, Leo, if Republicans do take the House, they need 218 to do it. The natural next question is, what will they do with that power? People have said that you could stop the spending. Is that going to be enough to make Republicans happy? There are also some investigations that I know a lot of Republicans are very interested in. But is that even the most important issue?
You know, Carly, that's a great question. It's a two-front war. They have to do investigations. I mean, the Hunter Biden situation, the Afghanistan, COVID. But they have to use their power as a check and a compromise. If Biden wants something, they say, okay, but let's secure the border. Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans have to use it as a check. If you want something, we want something. And that way, the American people win. They have to use their power to the fullest extent. Do not give in to the progressive left.
Lee Zeldin apparently lost New York. At least that's what the numbers are showing at this point. Even though we focus on the crime and homelessness issue, 2 other states where that is huge, Oregon as well as California. Focusing on the governor's race in Oregon for a moment, do you think the Republican takes it there?
I think there's a very good chance. I'll tell you why. Lee Zeldin did a great job in New York, Todd, as far as bringing the crime issue. In these Democratic cities, I live in Los Angeles, in these Democratic cities, in Portland, you have situations where crime has been rampant since 2020, and Democratic incumbents have done absolutely nothing. You know, when we talk about Georgia and Brian Kemp, Stacey Abrams disrespected law enforcement. I mean, it's a bottom line where people, even Democrats, are saying we want safe streets. The number one obligation of every civilized organization is to protect the citizens. And the Democrats have abandoned law enforcement. They have abandoned safety, and Democratic voters want safety.
Yeah, there are some bright spots that Republicans are celebrating this morning. And if Christine Drazan, she's at 44.7% against Tina Kotek, which is right now at 45%, 65% reported in right now. If Drazan can pull that off, that will certainly be a bright spot for Republicans to talk about moving forward. Leo, thank you so much for waking up with us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're the best. All right, Governor Ron DeSantis sailing to victory and making a statement with a big win in Miami-Dade County. Blue Miami-Dade.
Americans have been voting for many years now. They've been voting with their feet. The woke agenda has caused millions of Americans to leave these jurisdictions for greener pastures. Florida is where woke goes to die.
But there was another big winner in Florida last night. His name, Corey Mills. There he is, the Republican flipping his district red for the first time in years. Corey Mills joins us live after this.
Florida Republicans winning big, with Governor Ron DeSantis beating Democrat Charlie Crist by double digits just 4 years after winning by less than 1%. Senator Marco Rubio beating Congresswoman Val Demings by a sizable margin. And Fox is now projecting Florida's 7th district to flip red for the first time in 6 years, with Republican Army veteran Corey Mills defeating Democrat Karen Green.
And Corey Mills joins us now fresh off his big win. Corey, great to have you here. How'd you do it? Why were you able to complete this big flip?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Todd and Carly. I'll say the biggest thing is that the Democrats have basically had the American people finally tell them definitively, we will not stand for your communist and your perverse ideology. You know, the things like economy and inflation was a driving factor. The things like their out-of-touch messaging, I think, was a big factor. But also, I think in my district specifically, they really saw me as a person of action. Whether it was my service in the military as a combat veteran, whether it was me going to Afghanistan to help rescue Americans after the botched withdrawal, or even during Hurricane Ian when I mobilized a team to go out and we started doing evacuations. We started delivering water, baby formula, baby wipes, things that were needed for the people here in my district. So they're tired of cheap political rhetoric and want a person of action. I think that they know they have that with me.
Corey, the cover of the New York Post this morning, it says "de future," referring to DeSantis. And I don't think they're talking about Florida's future. I think they're talking about the country's future. What happens in 2024 now that Ron DeSantis has gained such a sizable victory? And what does that mean, DeSantis versus Trump? How do you see all of this playing out?
Well, you know, I'm not really sure right now on whether it's a Trump versus DeSantis ticket or a Trump DeSantis ticket or who puts their hat in and where. I'm just blessed that here in the free state of Florida, we get to have at least another 4 years with a great governor who has, you know, went against the political science and opted in for medical science. He knew not to shut down our schools. And as a result of that, we're the 3rd highest education in the country. You know, we're the 2nd lowest on taxes in the country. And I think that it really says a lot when so many people, even before the elections, were voting with their feet by leaving blue states and coming here to Florida because they understood what they really are looking for is for America to be more like Florida.
Looking ahead, though, to future elections, what lessons can Republicans that are waking up this morning in states that they did not see the success that they did in Florida, what lessons can those Republicans learn from Ron DeSantis, from Corey Mills, from Marco Rubio as to how to campaign better?
Well, I'll tell you, you know, voter contact's really the big deal. So, you know, we've walked probably, I can't tell you how many miles, but we've knocked over 150,000 plus doors since I entered this race in March of 2021. And I can say that, you know, when it came to events, we've done hundreds of events throughout this. We've given town halls, we've given meet and greets, we've had big rallies. And I think that one of the things that Ron DeSantis has done great at, and as has Marco Rubio, is that really rallying around the Republican candidates and nominees here in the district. And so I think that rather than them thinking about about themselves. Governor DeSantis was really about making sure that the entire state won. He recognized me in many of his speeches, and so I think that you saw a real unity for the conservative red wave here in Florida.
Corey, how do you explain what happened in Miami-Dade County? It turned red, flipped red for DeSantis for the first time in, what, 20 years?
Yeah, look, I'll say it time and time again. The American people are awake, not woke. You know, it's one of those things where they see the CRT and indoctrination in our schools and our military academies, the ESG trying to creep into our corporations. They saw the unconstitutional vaccines that were being pushed by the blue. They saw that the continuation of trying to lock down schools by the Democrats. And, you know, when it came to Ron DeSantis and Republicans here, even in the Florida state legislature, you know, they really stood for the American people and parental rights and the right to choose.
Corey, we're glad that you won. We will no longer have to call you Corey Mills congressional candidate.
All right.
Because of your victory last night, and we appreciate you waking up with us. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Congressman-elect.
Thank you so much.
That's right. He's been elevated
Yeah,
in title.
almost. We have to wait for the official thing to come down.
Thanks, Corey. All right, Democrat John Fetterman projected as the winner in Pennsylvania's Senate race.
And with other key races too close to call, majority control in the Senate still hangs in the balance. We are checking back in with our power panel, political panel next.
Four Senate seats are still up for grabs this morning, including Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, and Wisconsin. Democrats surging a big win in Pennsylvania, and Republicans in Ohio. Brooke Singman has the results on the top races. Brooke.
Hey, Democrat Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman is defeating Republican candidate Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania's Senate race. Now, Fetterman delivering his victory speech early this morning. Watch.
We jammed them up. We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do. That's why I'll be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania.
In Ohio, Republican J.D. Vance defeating Democrat candidate Tim Ryan for the Senate seat by 6%. Now, that is a wider margin than predicted. Here's Vance late last night.
Whether you voted for me or not, the thing that I promised to do is go to the United States Senate and fight every single day for the people of Ohio. Thanks to you, we get an opportunity to do just that. I will never forget the great people of Ohio. Thank you for this honor to serve you. I'll fight for you every day. God bless you guys, and thank you.
Republican Ted Budd defeating former North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Cheri Beasley by 3% in the state's Senate race. Budd delivering his victory speech late last night. Listen.
Well, thank you, North Carolina. You know, as someone who was born and raised here in North Carolina, this state's part of me. It's in my bones, and I want to make the old North State that much better again.
But it is still too close to call in some of the biggest Senate races, including Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Democrat candidate Raphael Warnock holding a very narrow lead over Republican candidate Herschel Walker in Georgia, signaling a potential runoff. Now, in Arizona, Republican Blake Masters is trailing behind Mark Kelly, but we do expect a longer delay in results from this state after reports of ballot glitches in up to 30% of polling sites. And in Nevada, Republican Adam Laxalt is gaining a stronger lead over Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto, widening the margin. Laxalt speaking earlier this morning and feeling optimistic.
We're in for a long night and maybe even a few days into this week as all the votes are tabulated, but we're confident that the numbers are there and we're going to win this race. We're going to take back Nevada and take back America. Thank you all.
As it stands in the Senate, both Democrats and Republicans have 48 seats. 51 are needed for the majority, and things can change very quickly, guys, so we will keep you updated as all the results come in. Carly, Tom.
All right, Brooke, thank you very much. Let's bring back our political power panel. Brian Brunberg, Executive Vice President at the King's College, Fox News contributor Joe Concha, and Mercedes Schlapp, CPAC Foundation Senior Fellow and former White House Director of Strategic Communications. Good morning to you all. Welcome back. We are getting fresh reactions reaction on these results. The latest from Jen Psaki. She says that she's been in touch with the White House. They are giddy, they are gleeful, as they should be, about where things are sitting right now. Mercedes, to you on that.
I'm sure they're shocked because I don't think they felt they were going to be able to pull it off the way they've been able to pull it off. And obviously, Republicans were very aggressive in their final days of saying this is going to be a red wave. I think I'm burning my red wave shirt now. But I got to tell you, Carly, they were able to hold their ground. The Democrats had strong fundraising numbers. They were very organized in these states, and that really helped push them over the edge. And, you know, some of these picks, I think there were some struggles. We talked about Pennsylvania with Doug Mastriano. He really could not garner more of that independent vote and even some of the moderate Republicans, and I think that hurt, for example, Dr. Oz's chances of winning.
Yeah.
So if you had a good governor pick like you did in a place like Ohio, that helped J.D. Vance, for example. So that really makes a difference.
So that leads us to Georgia and what's going to happen there, because there is a good Republican governor pick now, and that race right now is 49-49. Could Kemp help Herschel Walker over the finish line there?
You know, I think we're going to get into a runoff situation, and you're going to see that then it gets tricky, because then how are you going to remotivate your voters to come out in December? It's challenging, and that's where the Republicans are going to have to say, we got to take the majority. We got to stand up against the radical Biden agenda and see if they can make, win come December.
We've seen that dance play out in 2020. We could see it again. Joe, I hear you chomping at the bit here.
Yes, in terms of what Mercedes is saying here. So as Ohio goes, right, where DeWine wins quite easily, right, then J.D. Vance, the boat is rising with him, right? And then we see with Georgia, same thing, right? Governor Kemp, Herschel Walker is about even with Raphael Warnock.
Right.
Now, the problem is when you get to a runoff, Kemp's no longer on the ballot. Herschel will have to earn this on his own.
But Kemp could campaign for Herschel Walker.
Completely, but it is different when you're just in the ballot box and you say 1, 2, right?
Yeah.
And with Oz, obviously with Mastriano, to Mercedes' point,
and in
when you
Georgia,
lose by, was it double digits? I think it was. That helped bring down Oz, who always was seen as a Jersey guy, by the way, by many Pennsylvania voters.
Yeah.
And Pennsylvania people do not like our people.
There are a lot of bright spots. There are a lot of bright spots for Republicans, but some are a little bit disappointed in the margins, Brian. Yeah. And one of the reasons for that is, for example, this Gallup poll, heading into Election Day, 40% of Americans approve of Joe Biden. Only 17% are satisfied with the way things are going. And only 17% of the country says the economy is in good or excellent condition. So you get into a situation where a lot of people are unhappy, but they're still voting for the party in power.
Well, if I'm the White House here, I want to be careful about the idea that I'm giddy and gleeful. I don't think the American people delivered a message last night that said you ought to be giddy and gleeful. They're saying, you've done a very, very bad job, but we weren't persuaded that some of these other guys could do it better. And so we've got a mixed bag. If the White House walks out of this and says, well, we won last night, then America has lost, because it is clear nobody's really that happy, except, you want to talk bright spots, we've already mentioned it, Florida's a bright spot. That's where voters delivered a resounding change. It's red.
Yeah, it used to be
That's where they liked the
state,
last
now
2
it's
years.
red. And here's the other thing about the House races that cannot be forgotten. In 2020, Republicans lost the White House, but they did gain 14 seats. So there was a smaller margin to pick up this time around. So where do things go? Why did this happen? Joe, I want to get you on this. Mark Thiessen had this take on the results so far. Watch.
All right.
So think about this. We have the worst inflation in 4 decades, the worst collapse in real wages in 40 years, the worst crime wave since the 1990s, the worst border crisis in U.S. history. We have Joe Biden, who is the least popular president since Harry Truman, since presidential polling happened, and there wasn't a red wave. That is a searing indictment of the Republican Party.
What do you think about that and the messaging going into the election about, democracy is in danger? Did that actually end up working here? How are you reading this?
Perhaps, because what we're seeing here is, to Mark's point, completely everything lined up for the opposition party here. When you have inflation at a 40-year high, skyrocketing crime dominating the local news every night, a border crisis where 4 or 5 million people crossing this country illegally in the first 2 years, and yet it's barely a red ripple in the the House, and they may not take the Senate. Now, they still could take the Senate, because if Laxalt wins in Nevada, Herschel wins in a runoff in Georgia, and Arizona is still very much an open race, then if the Republicans take the Senate and they barely take the House, well, it doesn't matter how much you win by, they'll still control those two chambers. All of that said, this should have been the red wave that even Democratic pundits on other networks were saying was absolutely going to happen. So is the Republican brand now broken in some level, Carly, where they're still not trusted that they can govern as effectively either?
Mercedes, final thought to you.
Also, you have a divide between Mitch McConnell and the Trump camp, right? Mitch McConnell did not put money into these key races until very late. In some cases, didn't even help out many of these Senate candidates, and that's a problem. Money came in way too late for some of these candidates, and I think that causing that division has created a big problem in the Republican Party.
Well, like we keep on saying, it's not election night, it is election week, possibly month, but we do have some questions answered so far, more to be answered to come. Mercedes, Brian, Joe, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Todd, over to you.
Texas Congressman Mayra Flores unseated last night in a race that could have big implications for the border crisis. We're talking to Tom Homan next.
Texas Congresswoman and Border Patrol wife Mayra Flores sounding off on Twitter after losing her House seat, writing, "The red wave did not happen. Republicans and independents stayed home. Do not complain about the results if you did not do your part." Flores unseated by her Democrat opponent Vicente Gonzalez in a hotly contested race for a redrawn district, and two other Texas Border Patrol agent wives vying for Texas congressional seats also upset by Democrats in border districts. Irene Jackson beat out by Democrat incumbent Veronica Escobar in the state's 16th district. Republican congressional candidate Cassie Garcia also falling short in her bid to unseat Democrat Congressman Henry Cuellar. Meanwhile, Republican congressional candidate Monica De La Cruz flipping the newly redrawn Texas 15th district red, becoming the first Hispanic woman to represent it.
With that, let us bring in Fox News contributor and retired acting ICE director Tom Homan. Tom, Mayra Flores raises a really good point, because on the surface, you'd think that Texas would vote for border security and the Border Patrol-related candidates right off the bat. But apparently, at least there in those three races Carly mentioned, they did not. What say you?
Well, you know, I'm actually shocked. It's like the border issue isn't resonating. I don't think people really understand that this is an historic border crisis, but it's just not about illegal immigration. I think people don't understand this is about fentanyl that kills over 100,000 Americans. This is about known suspected terrorists across that border. Look, they've arrested 114 since Joe Biden's taken office. There's over 1 million known gotaways. So how many of them are known suspected terrorists? People need to understand this is about border security. This is about national security. And look, maybe the plan works for the Democrats. Maybe if you ignore it and deny it, it's effective. It seems to be effective for them just to say Alejandro Mayorkas to get on TV every day and say border secure, even though we have tape from Bill Melugin showing just the opposite. Maybe that works. Maybe saying, it's not a bad problem. We're ignoring it. And besides, the border secure. Maybe that works for them. I don't know, but I'm shocked that we didn't get more seats in the House, especially in Texas. It's getting overwhelmed.
Yeah, Bill Melugin has been an Eagle Pass, and he recently said that he's seeing the single busiest period of time in recent memory at the border. So the news is focused on this election cycle, but the illegal immigration crisis coming into Texas has never been worse than it is now, according to what our reporter Bill Melugin on the ground is seeing there. However, when it comes to illegal immigration and the Hispanic vote, Tom, it's not just Texas. We saw a big night for Republicans in Florida, a state that does see illegal immigration coming through the waters off the coast of Florida there.
Yeah, maritime smuggling is at its all-time high, not just through Florida and that area, but also through the West Coast, through San Diego, working around the fence line. And again, I get that, first of all, we're the only network. Fox is the only network even talking about this. You go to the other networks, I've done it. I went to other networks to see what they're talking about the border, and they're simply not. Again, ignoring the issue, denying the issue seemed to have some effect on this. But if people really knew what was going on that border, they would understand this is not it's just not an immigration issue anymore. No matter what your opinion is on illegal immigration, this is a matter of national security. It's a matter of public safety. When the criminal cartels of Mexico have operational control of our borders, That is not a good thing, and I think a lot of American people just don't understand that.
Tom Homan, thanks for trying to break it down for us. We appreciate
Thank
it,
you,
sir,
Tom.
as always. We're looking at the latest results, the economy, crime, education, still top issues for voters. Lara Trump next.
But first, Steve Doocy has a look at what's coming up on Fox and Friends. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Carly and Todd. America's waking up on this Wednesday morning, and no party has clear control of either the House or the Senate. It's a nail-biter. We're monitoring the results coming in, and we'll bring you any calls from our decision desk the instant they say, yep, that person's going to win. Plus, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is going to join us live following his decisive win over Democrat Stacey Abrams, who has already conceded. That's new. Also, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik also had a huge night. And analysis from Newt Gingrich and Mike Huckabee. What is going on with the midterms? So we have a busy 3 hours. Kicks off just about 8 minutes and 15 seconds from right now, right here on the channel you trust for your morning news. More analysis from Todd and Carly and the gang on Fox and Friends first, after a quick timeout. Right back.
Fox News' latest voter analysis finds economy the most important issue for voters by a huge margin. 61% say President Biden is to blame for the country's skyrocketing inflation, and 51% say they feel less safe under the current administration.
Fox News contributor Lara Trump here to react. Lara, for those waking up disappointed that there wasn't a red tsunami to handle those issues that Carly just mentioned, what's your message in light of the fact that the Republicans look like they will take the House and possibly even the Senate, too?
Well, it's very frustrating, I think, to wake up the day after and still not really know exactly where we stand. I think that's why a lot of people say maybe we need to take a look at how we vote in this country and figure out a better way to do it. This seems a little crazy to people. But, Todd, I think to your point, those polls that you just referenced really do show where voters are concerned and where the American people's concerns lie right now. You have to, I think, look to different races around the country to really feel where these polls kind of played themselves out. Look at New York Congressional District 17, where you have Michael Lawler, a Republican, looking to flip this seat from Sean Patrick Maloney from blue to red. Now, where is that district? It's just outside of New York City. Think about how many people got out of New York, took their families out into these areas like Westchester County, and moved away from a place they felt like they weren't safe, where they didn't believe their kids were getting a great education. They moved to counties like that. You don't have to look very much farther. You look down at where I am in the state of Florida. I moved my family down here. We saw the blowout victory, of course, for Ron DeSantis down here. But then you look at a state like Oregon, where this Oregon governor's race is neck and neck right now. You have Christine Drazan looking to flip the state of Oregon to a Republican governor. It is absolutely incredible that this race is so close, but I think it speaks to those polls, that sentiment that we have seen all across the country. Of course, we have to be patient and wait for everything to play out. We all wish we could know all the answers right now.
From the House, Senate, governor's races to 2024, former President Trump says he's going to make a big announcement on November 15th. What will that announcement be?
You guys want me to tell you here this morning?
Sure do.
I'll let my father-in-law make the announcement as soon as he is ready, which looks like it will be on Tuesday. He has alluded to the fact that he is strongly considering getting back in and giving it another run for 2024. I'll let him say it if that is what he ultimately decides to do. But you look at the fact that people in this country right now, 75% of them feel like we are headed in the wrong direction. Man, do we need to change course, and we need to do it quickly. So I think if there's ever a time people are ready for Donald Trump to come back, it could be right now. We'll see what happens on Tuesday.
Republicans celebrating Florida big time this morning. Should Republicans transform their approach to campaigning, to governance, based upon the Florida model going forward?
Yeah, well, it's a common sense approach. I think that's what we've seen from the governor here, Ron DeSantis. We're excited to have him for another 4 years. And I think that, look, whenever you block out all the woke nonsense and you focus on doing what is best for the people of your state, you see the results, and you see Florida picking up a congressional seat, over the past several years because so many people moved into this state. The decisive victory says it all. People need to start paying attention to how we've done it down here.
Well, America still has a lot of counting to do with those 4 Senate races and still some House races to go to be called. Laura, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on this day after the midterm elections. Fox and Friends starts right now.
Is that a painting or is that real? It looks real. I assume it is. Hi, everybody. Election night might be over, but as predicted, the battle for control of Congress continues this morning as we await results in several key races across this great nation.
Yeah, that's right. The balance of power in the Senate is up in the air as Democrats and Republicans are tied with 48 seats. 51 are needed for a majority.
4 key Senate races still have not been decided in Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, and Wisconsin. We are closely monitoring those races as the results come in. Folks, this is a nail-biter. Yeah, and so many high-profile races, obviously the Senate, too. We might get some results within our show. The House is also still up for grabs, believe it or not, where 218 seats are needed for control. You can see Republicans are inching closer and closer to the majority and making McCarthy Speaker.
Many tight races ending with some major upsets and some critical wins for both parties.
Somebody who's down in Washington with his pulse on the people, we hope. That's why we woke up Kevin Corke live in the Bureau. Hey, Kevin.
Always great to be with you, my friend, and good morning. You know, it's almost as if they knew something was up before election night. You see, Democrats here in Washington had quietly been reassuring each other that, other than the so-called red wave, to expect something a little less ominous. They thought it really wasn't coming, and it turns out it certainly didn't. And certainly didn't happen in Pennsylvania, because there, John Fetterman, the man who struggled through his lone debate, somehow still managed to ride the wave of massive early voting and mail-in balloting to best Dr. Oz.
We jammed them up. We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do. That's why I'll be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania.
Can't wait to do the voting autopsy on the Keystone State. So many questions. Meanwhile, over in Ohio, J.D. Vance pulls off the win over Tim Ryan to claim a much heralded Senate seat in the Buckeye State.
Whether you voted for me or not, the thing that I promise to do is go to the United States Senate and fight every single day for the people of Ohio. Thanks to you, we get an opportunity to do just that. I will never forget the great people of Ohio. Thank you for this honor to serve you. I'll fight for you every day. God bless you guys, and thank you.
Meanwhile, barring any major surprises on the House side, Republican Kevin McCarthy and the GOP certainly seem poised to usher Nancy Pelosi right out of the Speaker's office.
When you wake up tomorrow, we will be in the majority and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority. Yeah! The American people are ready for a majority that will offer a new direction, that will put America back on track. Republicans are ready to deliver it.
Well, they certainly have an opportunity to do that, again, assuming no major surprises, as we continue to count the tally, 218 to take the majority. Now, all this is happening as we await the final tally in Nevada. A major Senate race there. Obviously, we're also keeping an eye on the Georgia Senate race as well. And I know people aren't talking as much about it, but we have particular interest in the gubernatorial battle happening down in Arizona, seeing how Kari Lake and Katie Hobbs are doing. I'll be watching it all, and I promise to give you all the details. But for now, back to you.
Okay, we're counting on you. Thank you very much, Kevin. Well, the red wave has not materialized in the House yet, but you know where it did materialize? the great state of Florida. The cover of the New York Post says young GOP star DeSantis romps to victory in Florida. DeSantis is the future because it looks like he will win by about 20 points, which is extraordinary given the fact that back in 2018, he beat Gilliam by just 33,000. DeSantis won everywhere in the state, and in particular in notable Democrat strongholds, and we've been talking about this over the last week. In Miami-Dade County, which Joe Biden won by 85,000 points, Ron DeSantis will win by close to double digits.
It is now a ruby red state. DeSantis is welcoming anyone who wants to escape their liberal states. Conservatism just works there. There he is with his family last night. Once the nation's premier swing state back in 2000, then George W. Bush won the presidency by a margin of just 500 votes. It's pretty clear that Florida has shifted to red now. Florida does not have a single Democrat holding a statewide office. Here was his victory speech last night.
After 4 years, the people have delivered their verdict. Freedom is here to stay. We saw freedom in our very way of life and so many other jurisdictions in this country wither on the vine. Florida held the line. We chose facts over fear. We chose education over indoctrination. We chose law and order over rioting and disorder. Florida was a refuge of sanity when the world went mad. We stood as a citadel of freedom for people across this country and indeed across the world.
So the other thing to add in, another one who had a convincing victory despite the zillions of dollars being spent against him was Marco Rubio. He was really strong. Val Deming's law enforcement background, high-profile name, very good speaker, huge dollars behind them. But bottom line is Marco Rubio is not vulnerable because he's done a very good job. He was basically the Secretary of State for the Central and South America under Trump. And then he was the mind behind the PPP loans. Well, the execution was fine, and you had to follow up to see who took advantage of the system. It shows he acted under pressure to get people money when they were forced to give up their jobs. So it does not surprise me. The other thing is that people constantly speculate. When you are unhappy with your state and you move to another state, are you going to take your politics with you? So far in Texas, the answer is no, and so far in Florida, the answer is no. But it just does so it's a segmentation of America. However, if you look at what happened in New York with Lee Zeldin closing in tight on Kathy Hochul despite $50 billion in her coffers and outnumbering Republicans 3-1, you see how many seats shifted. And right now, Zeldin's probably within 5 points. It might be out of reach for him. There's no been concession there. You see there's some unhappiness. But I don't know about you guys. I'm shocked there was a no red wave. If you think about inflation, a 40-year high, crime, the worst since the 1980s, the unpopular president with an agenda that's more green-oriented than people-oriented. And evidently, Jen Psaki said last night, she called the White House and she says they are giddy on the results, which I think is premature because they could lose both chambers still. And one looks very much in Republican hands, although not officially there.
Well, it's just clear that our country is completely divided now. You're either very conservative or you're radical and you're progressive and you're woke left. And the facts don't seem to matter here. Some of these individuals that won, when you look at their records, they are so extreme and so progressive. People are just dug in. They're dug in really deep right now. And
John Fetterman you're talking about?
Absolutely. He is so extreme, wants to open up a third of the prisons.
Doesn't frack?
Yeah, exactly, and lied about it. How about Mandela Barnes? I mean, he wants to open 50% of the prisons.
Right. He's trailing.
And he's running against Ron Johnson, but it's still tight. But how do you explain this country now, Brian, to your point? I mean, we have open borders, record gas prices, inflation is the worst in 40 years. The president's approval ratings are so bad, worst crime since the 1980s, and yet I heard last night this is an indictment on the Republican Party. Is it? I mean, how are these issues, when our country is in such a bad state right now, how is this not a red wave?
Well, you know, when you look at how the Democrats, and Brian, to your point, I get why the White House would be giddy, because yesterday we were talking about, you looked at the polls, and they suggested that there's going to be a gigantic red wave. There has been no red wave yet, but it's still too close to call regarding the Senate, and a bunch of House seats have not been called, so they lean to the right for the most part. They're leaning toward the Republicans. But I think what was proven yesterday is America is more in the middle. And ultimately, well, there are a lot of people who are very strident in their politics, but there are the people in the middle who ultimately decided. If the Democrats were able to limit their losses through the issue of abortion, and I was looking over at the CNN exit polls, they said that 27% of the voters in House races said that abortion was their #1 issue, second only to inflation. And of those who cited abortion as their most important issue, 76% voted for the Democrat. Also, abortion voters sided with Democrats in favor of abortion rights in Michigan, California, and Vermont. So while we've been talking a lot about inflation, and it certainly does impact people, it seems like abortion was a gigantic motivator for Democrats.
Yeah, and we're going to see what happens, because you mentioned radical up the middle. Mandela Barnes is way to the left in Wisconsin. John Fetterman is way to the left in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Warnock
is very...
Warnock is way to the left, pretending that he wasn't in Congress. But listen, right now there's so much to determine. This is why you got to watch throughout the show. Things are changing. Think about Nevada. Right now we're 48-48. Adam Laxalt slightly in front. And then you see what's happening in Georgia. We look like we're heading to a runoff. I don't think anyone doubts that. But we'll see what the runoff will mean, because you have also in the Senate race Mark Kelly with his lead, but is shrinking in Arizona. All this is developing throughout our show.
Well, Florida everyone's watching Florida. That was interesting, the New York Post cover, the future. So we'll find out if he's going to run for president. We don't know yet if President Trump is going to run for president.
It was very telling, Ainsley, in that soundbite we ran with Ron DeSantis, they were chanting 2 more years. Clearly, those people are thinking he's going to the White House.
Well, and Marco Rubio, first Republican in Florida to win a third 6-year term.
Yeah,
he was outraised and outspent by Val Demings. As you mentioned, Rubio won re-election by more than 16 points.
Well, Francis Suarez is somebody people are saying he's such a great mayor in Miami. They're saying don't be surprised if he runs for president. He's joining us in about 20 minutes.
Also, Anna Paulina Luna, she just won Florida's 13th district to the U.S. Congress, and she will be with us as well.
We have a lot to discuss, so many notes,
and
so
a lot
many
to
are
decide.
Developing and unwinded. We're thrilled you're here.
Indeed. All right,
We hope that we find out these Senate seats while we're on the air.
That'd be great.
Don't turn your channel. Still ahead, a Fox weather alert. We're tracking the tropical storm Nicole. Warnings and watches are now in effect as that system, it's gaining a lot of strength off of Florida's east coast, and Janice Dean is tracking it all.
Plus, laughing, giggling, all-out bragging. Joe Concha breaks down the mainstream media's reaction to Democrats' midterm wins and the fact that both chambers are still in the balance. Don't move. That's Joe, looking grim. To the surprise of nobody, all eyes are on Georgia right now. And if you don't get 50%, you have a runoff December 6th. And right now, Walker and Warnock within a point of each other, 0.9% of each other. Walker, Warnock with a slight lead. We have a situation where 98% of all the ballots are counted.
Right.
A substantial win for the governor, for Brian Kemp. Stacey Abrams already admitted she lost this time, but right now this is obviously heading to a runoff.
And so far, the Georgia case, if we could go back to Georgia for just a second, Mark, Georgia is the case where there obviously was some ticket splitting going on because the governor did win decisively. And Stacey Abrams, to your point, Brian, has already conceded. But Herschel Walker, look at that, is actually trailing. So we're going to be talking about ticket splitting throughout the day and over the next week or so. But when you look at, and now we'll move to the Nevada Senate, Adam Laxalt is actually right now up over Cortez Masto by a couple of points. So that is looking good for the Republicans.
With 72% of the vote in, so a lot left to count in Nevada. And evidently they had a snowstorm and they shut the polls early in some places.
For safety.
Yeah, for safety, but you just wonder about that.
And in Georgia, that runoff is going to be on December 6th. Is that
is.
right? And we're expecting there to be a runoff. Georgia's now a purple state.
So we're at 48-48. If Laxalt holds on 49-48, then you wonder about Arizona. Right now, Kelly's got about a 4-point lead with, I guess we're at about 65%. So when Carly went off the air, was it 65% of the votes are in? So we got to wonder if it comes down to Georgia. And if it comes down to Georgia, how much money and attention is going to pour in there? Traditionally, before the last runoff election, Republicans seem to have an advantage. The Libertarian drops out. The 1.5% goes into play, and usually it goes to the right.
Well, we remember the last time there was a special election down in Georgia. Let's see what happens this time.
People are wanting Ron DeSantis to go and campaign for him, for Herschel Walker.
If I was them, I would too. All right, 6:19 now here in the East. And Carly, a lot going on numbers-wise and other news as well.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to start here, guys, with the crisis at the southern border. Officials in Del Rio sector reporting more than 3,100 migrants escaped CBP custody last week alone. Agents apprehending nearly 10,000. 2 are sex offenders, 1 from Mexico, the other from Nicaragua. Meanwhile, another busy morning of illegal crossings in Eagle Pass in Normandy, Texas. Our drone capturing 3 groups of several hundred migrants. You can see them on your screen there. Elon Musk unloading nearly $4 billion worth of Tesla stock. That's nearly 20 million shares. It's the 3rd biggest sell-off by the CEO since he launched his Twitter takeover bid. Tesla hitting a 52-week low yesterday as many investors fear Musk is preoccupied with his social media venture. Forbes says Musk's net worth plummeting to just a meager $197 billion. Mark Zuckerberg is laying off thousands of Facebook employees this morning. He told executives yesterday that he's accountable for the social media giant's missteps. That includes overstaffing. Zuckerberg specifically mentioning cuts to the recruiting and business teams. Facebook parent company Meta says it will provide at least 4 months' salary as severance. That is Meta's first mass layoff ever. And there is one lucky winner for that $2.4 billion Mega Ball jackpot. The ticket was sold at Joe's Service Center in Altadena, California. The owner receiving a check for $1 million, and he now has a sign outside his shop that reads "Billionaires Made Here." He's not wrong about that. The winning numbers are 10, 33, 41, 47, 56, and the Powerball number of 10. And there were plenty of other big prizes. A store in Florida sold a ticket worth $2 million, while 22 people had tickets worth $1 million. Those are your headlines. I played. I did not win.
Me too. And you win $1 million if you got the 5 but missed the Powerball.
Did you see his sign outside of his store? As you mentioned, it said "Billionaires are made here," but it originally said "millionaires," and he put a B with a piece of paper over the M.
Even better news.
Congratulations to some lucky person in California.
Could you imagine? Change your world.
Boom!
Change so many people's lives.
Right. You don't need the overdraft in your checking anymore. You can pretty much understand everything's going to clear.
How many times did I got dinged for that? I called my mom.
And it's so affordable.
I need $100, please.
20% every hour they make you pay. Meanwhile, let's go to a Fox weather alert now. Thousands of Florida residents can no longer focus on the election. They're told to evacuate as Tropical Storm Nicole approaches the state's east coast. Residents are filling sandbags to prepare.
And, of course, many people lined up at gas stations, and there was, as always, panic buying of food and water and toilet paper, leaving some store shelves, as you can see right there, empty.
Fox Weather senior meteorologist Janice Dean has the Fox Weather forecast. Janice, I remember when Sandy hit, Brian did all the sandbags in his front yard.
And he said, I got wet sandbags.
He said he got wet sandbags and lasted for, what, a year? The sand never went away.
I still use it as weights to keep my umbrellas up.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, we still talk about Brian and Sandy all these years later, 10 years later.
It flooded his main floor.
I know, absolutely. Some people are still out of their homes 10 years later, and that just shows you the scope of what kind of damage these systems can do. So folks in Florida are bracing for impact overnight tonight into Thursday. Let's take a look at it. And also, we have a big winter storm across the west. You mentioned it impacting voting in Nevada. We warned you about that. Feet of snow for the Sierra Nevada region in towards the Intermountain West. West, and we are talking about this system, which we do predict to become a minimal hurricane as it makes impact across the east central coast of Florida this evening. We have hurricane warnings in advance for the Bahamas towards West Palm Beach and Daytona Beach. Here is the track, the Fox model, as we go through time overnight tonight, making impact the center of the storm crossing over Port St. Lucie and then perhaps into the Gulf of Mexico side and then up towards the Panhandle and then towards the southeast and the mid-Atlantic. There's Port St. Lucie, rainfall 3 to 5 inches. We're going to be dealing with storm surge, heavy rainfall, and hurricane force gusts in the next 12 to 24 hours. So that's what we're going to be tracking at Fox Weather. Of course, we are definitely doing all of the election forecasts, but also the weather forecast is important as well. Steve Ainsley, Brian, over to you.
Because this is a very big and powerful storm. Thank you, JD.
All right, the media wasting no time in celebrating key Democratic victories.
It looks like it's going, and there isn't a gigantic red wave. There's more like a red ripple, and they don't.
This might feel more like the edge of a lake, with it just moving up an inch or two here and there.
It just doesn't seem to have any sense of a wave.
I think that big sound that you hear is Democrats having a big sigh of relief.
Joe Biden is on the verge of being the most successful Democratic president in a midterm election that we have seen in quite some time.
Joining us now to react is Fox News contributor Joe Concha. Joe, what's your reaction?
Wow, I wouldn't be so giddy if I'm the White House or if I'm the people that serve them in the media right now. One word was used during that montage: relieved. But just for now, as you guys have been talking about, there are still. The Senate is in play as far as Wisconsin. Ron Johnson takes that. Adam Laxalt in Nevada. Then Georgia with Herschel Walker in the runoff. And Arizona is still in play with Blake Masters. So it could come down to, look, a lot of people thought that Republicans are going to win by 3 touchdowns here, right? But if they win by a field goal in the House and an extra point in the Senate, those are still 2 victories that give them those 2 chambers, and they're in control regardless. The big story that I saw out of last night, as far as Republican politics are concerned, is what happened in Florida that you guys were talking about, a blowout victory by Ron DeSantis, winning in Miami-Dade, which that's a deep blue county. And several House seats were flipped in Florida as well, so you used a perfect term, Ainsley. Ruby red is now Florida. It used to be a purple state, right?
I stole it from you. I heard you say it on Fox and
Well,
Friends.
oh, you stole that from me!
Wait a minute, let's change it. Let's make it Rubio red.
Yeah,
Rubio red, right, who also had a big victory as well when some people thought that Val Demings was actually a threat. And I think the reason was because Ron DeSantis, unlike some of these other candidates who are rookie candidates who are just talking right now what they want to do, he has a record to run on as far as opening that state first, which a lot of people you talk to in Florida still thank him for. There's been an exodus to Florida ever since, and what their children aren't being taught in Florida.
Well, a lot of people that might have voted for Zeldin here in New York have left. Many of them have gone to Florida, Tennessee, Texas.
That's a great point. And somebody I was watching the speech with last night that Steve may or may not know, who isn't a very political person at all because she's working too hard and taking care of the kids, watched DeSantis' speech and said, that looked presidential to me. He gave the speech of his life last night, and you have to wonder now what the 45th president is thinking as far as competition with Ron DeSantis if he decides to run, because he has the wind at his back right now.
You've got to think about what is Joe Biden thinking, because yesterday, going in, the polls all predicted there's going to be a massive red wave. Sure. You know, the Republicans were going to take the House by a gigantic majority. That has not materialized yet. Some houses could flip here shortly, and we'll tell you immediately once the decision desk lets us know. But the face of that loss for the Democrats was going to be Joe Biden.
Precisely.
Now, Joe Biden is the face of the Dems not doing so bad. So you got to figure Joe Biden's thinking, you know what, I am going to run for re-election.
Precisely, because this would have been a referendum on him.
Yeah.
But the bad news for the country is that, let's say there were 20, 30, 40 seats flipped in the House and Republicans had 53, 54 seats in the Senate. Then I would think the president would be forced to fire some people around him and make some changes to his cabinet. Now that may not happen, and they're going to stay the course. Stay the course on what? 40-year high inflation and spending, gas prices still too high for people's taste, crime still being too high, education, the border. Nothing will change now as a result, and that's bad news for the country.
Well, it will change if they flip the House and the Senate. But I will say this, the CBS poll asked people on the exit, What do you think of Joe Biden? Only 30% express support for running for a second term.
Isn't that amazing?
And then other Dems just got to go. They have to decide who's going to challenge him. Joe, thanks so much.
It's the Hanukkah of elections. It's going to be 8 crazy nights. So enjoy, guys.
Absolutely.
You know 2 things I wouldn't want to be right now, by the way? Any pollster and anyone who doesn't have access to Pixie Sticks or coffee right now, because it would be a tough morning without that.
Pixie Sticks.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Love
Joe.
'em.
Thanks, Joe. All right, coming up.
Tell your wife thanks for the analysis, by the way.
Wasn't. Maybe it was my son or daughter. We don't know this.
Yeah, they're 4.
All right, coming up today, Republicans making gains with Deep Blue New York, including George Santos flipping a Long Island district red. Lifelong Democrats join us live to explain why they voted for the GOP this election.
Some races still too close to call. Keep it right here on Fox. We'll let you know as soon as they figure it out. In the meantime, here in New York, Governor Kathy Hochul elected to her first full term in office, but only by a very slim margin, the teleprompter says, due in part to the fierce campaigning for Congressman Lee Zeldin on behalf of our next guest, who now, Hope Hochul, will see how important crime is for the people in the Empire State. Join us right now. We've got lifelong Democrat Dov Hikind right over there and Yatin Chu as well. And they both were on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about how they were supporting Lee Zeldin. Yatin, you've got to be, you got to feel badly that your candidate didn't win, but at the same time, maybe this will force the governor to wake up and smell the crime in the streets.
Well, it's clear that she doesn't have the mandate, right? The race is close. I am disappointed. I was at his event last night and was sad to see how the results were coming in. It wasn't what we expected.
Well, I heard a portion of his speech, and he said there were still over 1 million ballots outstanding, and he felt ultimately, Dov, that he would prevail.
Well, I don't know if he'll prevail, but there's no question that the issue of crime is front and center now for the new governor. And, you know, of course, we wish he would have won. But what I want to say is that we were all disappointed looking at the bigger picture. You know, what happened? We're supposed to be great victories all over the country. And part of the problem, I don't think there's any question in my mind, that hurt Republicans all over, is Donald Trump. And I think, you know, I would say to the former president, who I supported and did great things during his term, I would say to him, move on. Move on. And when you, I mean, a couple of days before the election, he tells the country he has a major announcement. Donald Trump, it was not about you. It was about the candidates that were running, and you took away from them. There's no question that he hurt candidates all over the country. And I would say to Donald Trump, on November 15th, you're going to make a major announcement. I would advise you, and I have great respect for you and things that you accomplished, I would advise you to announce to the country that DeSantis is the one that we should support so that we can win the White House in 2024. Donald Trump, you had your opportunity. You hurt your party that you love, your country, in this election. So, Donald Trump, move on.
Yatin, regarding what happened here in New York State, there was a red wave in Long Island, where Dov lives, and there were pockets. But ultimately, you know, here in New York City, Mr. Zeldin would have to get at least 30%. And the higher the turnout, the worse for him. Obviously, both sides. Your side was motivated, so were Democrats. More people showed up, voted for her.
Exactly. I think there are definitely pockets in Queens, in parts of Queens, in Brooklyn, in Staten Island, and certainly in Long Island that went for Lee Zeldin. Turnout was good for Kathy Hochul, and she prevailed. as far as the results that we see today.
Yeah, and there you see right now we're projecting that Kathy Hochul wins with close to 53%, Lee Zeldin at 47. So, you know, I know you were just talking about the Trump effect on the midterms, but ultimately, as they start to do postmortems, the Republicans, was there one issue they got wrong, or did they get the issues right? They just couldn't motivate people.
Well, they had the issues right. And everything up until a few days before, everyone was predicting. I mean, it wasn't just Fox that was saying clearly what was going to happen here. A great victory for the Republican Party all over the country. I mean, the other side was doing the same thing because they read the numbers. Something happened, and we've got to be honest about it. What went wrong? And more people you talk to who were supporters of Donald Trump, you know, nobody wants to say it openly, but it's time to be honest if we want to move on and have great victories in this country. Someone like DeSantis, I mean, look, he's a superstar. And, you know, we need that change. I want Donald Trump to be the hero. Support DeSantis, and let's move on. He hurt the party. There's no question about it. No question about it.
Let's see what his big announcement is next week.
DeSantis. It'll be DeSantis.
Well, let's see. Dov Hikind and Yatin Chu, thank you very much for joining us. All right.
Thank you.
Coming up on this Wednesday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who we were just talking about, flips diverse Miami-Dade County red for the first time in decades. Miami's mayor on the impact of the Latino vote, still ahead.
No matter how many press conferences you give about the threat to democracy and all this other garbage, we are never going to abandon common sense.
We have embraced freedom. We have maintained law and order. We have protected the rights of parents. We have respected our taxpayers, and we reject woke ideology. Florida is where woke goes to die. People have come here because our policies work. Leadership matters.
And that was a victory speech for a Republican that has a lot of momentum, Governor DeSantis. It was once the nation's primetime swing state, but massive GOP victories, shifting Florida from purple to solid red. No one would deny it. Most striking was Miami-Dade County, a traditional Democratic stronghold with a high Latino population where DeSantis is the first GOP governor to win in now 20 years. Joining us now to discuss it in the heels of the very exciting night, another rising star on the Republican side, Miami Mayor Francis Suarez. Mr. Mayor, it looks like Ron DeSantis took the Hispanic vote in Florida 57 to 42, so he wins by 15. Gillum won it by 10 4 years ago. Why?
Well, you have to look at the trend of what's happening. I mean, in 2016, Donald Trump lost Miami-Dade County by 30 points to Hillary. In 2020, that 30-point margin was just an 8-point margin in favor of Biden. And now you're seeing Miami-Dade County go completely red by double digits, both for Marco and for the governor. I think it means that people in Miami-Dade County and in Florida, by the way, you win Miami-Dade County, you have a great chance of winning Florida by a huge margin. And we saw that also last night, a 20-point margin in Florida, which is unheard of for a Republican candidate. I think it sets a template for how we can win nationally.
Right.
You know, in Miami, we have 3 simple rules. We keep taxes low, we keep people safe, and we lean into innovation to create high-paying jobs in the greatest country on the planet. And that message has resonated with Miami-Dade County voters, and they're rewarding Republicans because we are, because we're running a competent government.
I agree with that, especially Miami's booming right now, and you're recruiting. Jen Psaki tweeted this out. Tell me what you think. It says, Latino vote is not the same everywhere. There are huge generational differences, and in Florida, a population of older voters, most likely Republicans, much larger than younger. Socialism does not play there, and there's a massive disinformation problem in the Spanish language media. What is he talking about? I don't speak Spanish. You probably listen to it and do. Cuban background. That's what I hear. Yeah. The Democrats go, well, it's just because the Hispanics are misinformed. What's going on?
You know, Democrats are in denial. They're in denial because they first tried to brand all Hispanics as Latinx. That didn't work. That sort of monolithic brand didn't stick. People don't like it. Then they tried to go nuance, and the president's the first lady said, that we're as unique as San Antonio tacos. That also didn't work, and obviously offended people. And now they're trying to come up with more excuses as to why Republicans keep gaining with Hispanics. Republicans gaining with Hispanics is not just big for Miami-Dade County or for Florida. It's big for the United States. It's a template for success for Republican elections for a generation national. And I think if we continue to communicate and connect with Hispanics, it could mean a tremendous amount in terms of, not just winning elections, but creating prosperity for a country and governing through the principles that have, that are the basis of Republican elected officials and Republican politics.
So, Mr. Mayor, it seems like the governor and the president, the former president, are pretty much going at it a little bit, where I think Governor DeSantis is keeping his powder dry. Do you see there's friction between the two, and will that affect whether you run or not for president?
Well, there's definitely friction between the two. I mean, I think the president, former president, even last night was sort of indicating it, and he's going to make an announcement on November 15th, and then we'll see how the chips fall. I think what's going to happen now is people are going to be doing these kinds of postmortems over the next couple of weeks, to the end of the year, to figure out exactly what went wrong, what went right for Republicans. And I think, one of the things you see in states like Pennsylvania and in Georgia is this sort of just appeal to one side could be disrupted by a libertarian candidate. So I think we need a broader appeal, a broader message to be more inclusive and generational as well.
Got it. Mr. Mayor, great to get your instant analysis. If people want to know what went right for Republicans, they should look at Florida, because everything did for them. The mayor of Miami, thank you. Meanwhile, let's go over to Carly Shimkus has the other breaking news. Hey, Carly.
Certainly do. And we begin in Jackson, Mississippi, where an arsonist is in custody for allegedly torching 2 churches and setting 5 other fires on Election Day. Officials say all but one of the fires were put out before voters hit the polls. Thankfully, no injuries were reported. Voters in North Dakota and Arkansas rejecting ballot measures to legalize recreational marijuana. A vote in South Dakota is still too close to call there, and 2 other states, Maryland and Missouri, did approve measures to legalize the drug. That brings the number of states with legal marijuana to 21. And in Arkansas, a Kansas City police officer, is being hailed a hero. Intense body camera footage shows the cops sprinting into a Missouri home to save the life of a 1-month-old baby girl who was not breathing. This officer saving the baby from choking to death. He even paid the tiny patient a visit as she recovers at the hospital. Wow, guys. Brian, how about that little baby and that police officer there?
Unbelievable.
What an image.
And we're probably the only station that shows what police officers do on a daily basis, and that's help people in every way, shape, or form. Thanks. Meanwhile, 12 minutes now before the top of the hour, Fox News voter analysis breaks down what was top of mind for Americans yesterday when they went to the ballot box. The most important issue and how they impacted the races. Dash still ahead, period.
It looks like the Democrats have swept the top contested seats in Pennsylvania, with John Fetterman projected to win over Dr. Mehmet Oz in what was a critical Senate race for Republicans, and Josh Shapiro defeating Doug Mastriano in the state's governor's race, turning the Keystone State blue. Here to react to the results, Pennsylvania-based columnist and reporter Selena Zito. Good morning to you, Selena.
Good morning, Ainsley.
Good morning. So what happened here? Do you think PA just ignored Fetterman's woke and radical positions? I mean, heroin injection sites, releasing convicted murderers, no fracking. He said a while ago, and now he's saying he's always been for fracking, no restrictions on abortion. What was the issue here?
It's crazy. It's astounding to see sort of everything that you just peeled off, and then you compare that with all the things that were most important to voters. And the decision the Pennsylvania voters made is sort of the opposite of what they said they were concerned about. And there's a couple things to unpack about Pennsylvania. First of all, I think former President Trump's sort of interference in that primary in May put a man, Dr. Oz, who, by the way, I will say ran a very good campaign, and he overcame a lot for someone who was never in politics before, and he overcame a big deficit. However, he never had a true natural base here, a true natural connection with the state. And I think that Fetterman used that to his advantage. He pounded him with that, and it was enough for voters to not feel as comfortable with him as they would have with Dave McCormick. I think running with Mastriano, who never ran a campaign that included creating coalitions to win an election. And when you have those two drags on you, you tack on almost 1 million people voting before the debate, and it was just too much for him to overcome trying to win over voters in the state.
Yeah, we're learning that. We've learned so much from this election because, or all the elections around the country, how important it is to have two strong candidates for each party, for the governor and for the Senate races. So you think he lost because of Mastriano? He was criticized for living in New Jersey before he lived in Pennsylvania. I know that those two states don't necessarily get along. What about the Oprah endorsement? She endorsed, she's good friends with Dr. Oz. She helped his celebrity status and helped make him a big name on television. Do you think that hurt him when she endorsed Fetterman?
No, I really don't. Pennsylvanians, the last statistics I saw from the census shows that 8 out of 10 Pennsylvanians grew up within 4 miles of where they live, right? Mm-hmm. So place and rootedness is very important. And Dr. Oz was never able to overcome that hurdle. Yeah. And so I think that was the larger problem. I think Mastriano ended up being the second problem. I think Donald Trump's over-endorsement of them, talking about running, on the eve before the election, all those things get in people's heads. Right. And I think really it caused the problem. All right. Well, and the debate was after early voting started. I'm not sure if that really influences anyone's vote. But when you look at high crime in Philadelphia, it's a little shocking. And some of the polls were completely wrong about this. Thank you so much for being on with us. Coming up, a big show still ahead. Governor Brian Kemp in the great state of Georgia. Also, Elise Stefanik, Newt Gingrich.